thing that I found most memorable after my mobility period is networking, because I guess share not only give us scholarship but also give us opportunity to meet more people or more students around the Asian countries. So that's really precious opportunity.
My exchange contributed to feeling or being a part of the Asean community by letting me gain friends from these countries, as well as exposing myself to the Asean Secretariat and also making me realize about the differences and the similarities of our cultures and languages, and also looking forward to the future plans of being in the Asean region.
Share is like a jumping platform for us to discover more about our strengths, our capabilities, and to what greater extent that we can be better than before. So I believe that it really helps me to become more confident and be determined of what I'm doing, and to be agile, to be able to work in a team regardless the backgrounds of the people that we're working with.
Now I'm working in Vietnam, but just a couple of years back, I was working in the Kingdom of Thailand. I'd say that share somehow contributes to the formation of identity, which goes beyond and above national boundaries.
Apart from my English, I think I learned how to be open-minded. It really helped when I first moved to a different region in Thailand to work as a teacher. Knowing different cultures also helped my students see the world beyond Thailand.
Mobility program, I joined Islamic community trip as well as many other trips with my Burmese, Korean, Indonesian and American friends from different states, villages and culture, which inspired me to work with a diversity of people from different background and culture, which I am doing today as a community outreach manager in an international IT company with a diverse employee and a work environment.
Hello, and welcome to the second day of Share Policy Dialogue 13. We've another interesting half day of sessions ahead with a focus on the nexus of university and employer collaboration. So to start our proceedings today, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Professor Bernard C.Y. Tan, Senior Vice Provost of Undergraduate Education at the National University of Singapore, or NUS. Professor Tan assists the Provost in setting educational directions and policies and assuring educational quality for the university. His achievements include the Public Administration Medal in 2012, NUS Outstanding Educator Award in 2004, and the NUS Young Researcher Award in 2002. Professor Tan is also a Shaw Professor in the Department of Information Systems and Analytics, and his research interests include social media, virtual communities, and internet commerce. He has given invited talks and keynote addresses at various international conferences, and his research work has been published in major international journals and conference proceedings in the field of information systems. Professor Tan, many thanks for joining us today. We look forward to your keynote on embedding employability in the university curriculum. And thank you also for agreeing to take questions from the audience at the end. And we invite the audience to address their questions to Professor Tan in the chat. Many thanks again for joining us, Professor, and over to you.
Thank you, Darren. A very good morning to all our friends from EU and a very good afternoon to all our friends from ASEAN. Okay, let's start the slides. Yes. So for today, I'll be sharing with you the NUS journey, the journey that NUS has undertaken in terms of doing our major curriculum reforms, right? We started this journey about 2 years ago, and what motivates us is, in fact, this chart here. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have already seen this chart, right? But there are a few salient features about this chart that I want to draw your attention to. Now, first of all, if you look at this chart, the first industrial revolution happens in the 1780s. The second one is 1870s. The third one is around 1970. And today we are seeing I 4.0, right? If we want to project the future, it is not hard for us to figure out that, over the next few decades, we will be seeing the full-blown I 4.0 and maybe even I 5.0, right? Considering the fact that our university students of today who graduate in the 2020s will be working all the way into the 2060s and 2070s. We think that all these students of today and graduates of tomorrow, they will be confronted with the challenges in a world characterized by I 4.0 or even I 5.0, right? They will be working in an environment where complex problems appear from time to time, problems that cuts across disciplines, requiring solutions that transcends disciplines. They will be working in an environment where industries will continue to refine and redefine itself, in the sense that some existing industries may vanish, new industries may emerge, and industry boundaries will increasingly become blurred, right? And what this implies is that for our students of today and the graduates of tomorrow, throughout their several decades, work life, we expect them to be disrupted multiple times. And when the disruption comes, notice I didn't say if the disruption comes. I say when the disruption comes, we would want to see them prevail, as in turning all these challenges into opportunities by reinventing themselves rather than succumb, as in becoming underemployed or becoming unemployed, right? And for us to help our students to prevail in such an environment, we need to be training our students right. So after thinking about what the future workplace will be like, we start to do introspection and examination of our internal educational processes, curriculum systems, to see what are the kinds of things that ought to be fixed. Right? So next slide, please. Now, here are all the problems that we uncover, the major problems that we uncover in the NUS education system of the past. First of all, we tend to focus a lot on immediate employment outcomes. When our students come through our system, we declare victory as soon as they find a first job upon graduation. Moving forward, it cannot be like this. Helping our students to get a first job is a very good start, but it is important for us to sustain them in terms of their employability throughout the next few decades, throughout their careers. A good start is not enough, right? Secondly, until a few years ago, we do not have a program of lifelong learning, right? In other words, continuing education and training. We train our students for a few years, we ship them out into the industry, we tell them that they are good for a lifetime, and we wish them well. Moving forward, this cannot be the case, because whatever knowledge that we impart to the students will become obsolete a few years, if not 10, 15 years down the road. So it is important that we have a system where students can come back to the university to reskill and to upskill as and when they need to do so in the course of their careers. Right? Now, the third problem that we have in our system in the past is that we tend to force many students down the single disciplinary route. And we train them heavily on one discipline with a little bit of knowledge on other disciplines, right? Moving forward, this cannot be the case because the students will be confronted uh, by the challenges of the workplace, which means interdisciplinary problems requiring interdisciplinary solutions, right? And in the past, even when we allow students to be exposed to training in more than one disciplines, we do not put in a lot of effort to do interdisciplinary connections. We leave these things to their own devices, to the devices of the students, and not surprisingly, many students cannot connect. So moving forward, we have to be more deliberate in exposing our students to interdisciplinary education by showing them all these connections, right? And also, moving forward, we want to make sure that our education system is where is student centric in the sense that they have the opportunities to pursue pathways that they are passionate about, things that make sense to them. Because if unless we give students all this choice to pursue something that they are passionate about, how can we expect them to engage in self-directed learning um, after they have graduated from the university and enter the workforce? Right? So with all these observations in place, we start to roll out initiatives to fix the university curricular problems. Next slide, please. So for today, I will be sharing with you what we have done in 5 of these major initiatives. Notice that this is a live document in the sense that as I speak, there are new developments that are still ongoing. Like for example, not included in this set of slides is the curricular reforms by our business school, who is looking into how to redo their business administration, accountancy, and real estate curriculum to make these more relevant for a fourth industrial revolution world, right? Likewise, the School of Computing is looking into how to redo their curriculum for computer science, for information systems, for business analytics, for information security, to make these majors more relevant for the future. Right? For today, I will be sharing with you 5 of these pieces that are more or less complete. Yeah. Next slide, please. Now, the first piece of reforms that we carried out is general education. General education is one part of our curriculum. These are 6 modules that are taken by students from all majors in the university, except the health sciences and law, because they have a very packed curriculum. But I will explain to you later that even for health sciences and law, the curricular structure is changing. Now, why do we have these 6 pillars under general education, right? Now, the first 2 pillars, cultures and connections, critique and expressions, these are things that are demanded by the industry, the major employers of our graduates. Whenever we conduct large-scale surveys of companies that hire our graduates, they tend to tell us that they want to see 2 things in our graduates. First of all, they want our graduates to be more globally aware, to be able to work in multinational teams. And this is why we create cultures and connections as a pillar to train our graduates. Right? And the industry also tells us that they want our graduates to be better communicators, to be more articulate in presenting their ideas. And therefore, we have a critique and expression pillar. Right? Now, furthermore, we look at all the major industries in Singapore and how it is going to be transformed in the future, right? And in fact, the Singapore government has created 23 industry transformation maps to give us a glimpse of what the industries would look like in the future, right? And in every of these 23 industry transformation maps, we see that all the industries that are important to Singapore and also many parts of the world are going to become more and more data-centric, more and more technology-driven in the future. Therefore, it is important that all NUS graduates have some level of data literacy and digital literacy. And this is why we have these two pillars in our general education. And then we have Singapore studies. We think that everybody who comes through the Singapore education system, particularly for international students, it would be worthwhile to know something about the background of Singapore. I mean, this is like when we do our undergraduate studies in the US, many universities require us to do American history, right? Now, over and above this, we have added a new pillars, communities and engagement. So beyond knowing something about Singapore, we think it is important for graduates of NUS to have some experience doing something to benefit different segments in the communities in Singapore, right? And this may have to do with the environment, may have to do with some communities that are in need of help and all that. And we think that this is important because it is a privilege to receive an education in NUS, given that there are so many applicants who wants to come in and there are so few who can actually get in, right? The literature is very clear that when students are exposed to all this community work when they are in school, they are much more likely to do this later on in their careers than when they do not have this kind of exposure. Therefore, we created the new general education curriculum as such to lay a foundation for all our majors. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, next, I'd like to share with you our second, the general education reform is the first major piece of education reform initiative. This slide actually summarized the second and the third piece. We create the College of Humanities and Sciences by merging the curriculum from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, as well as the curriculum from the Faculty of Science. Why do we choose to merge arts and social science with science? Now, when we look at the industries that graduates from arts and social science and science tends to go into, we realize that there are some commonalities in there, in the sense that these graduates tend to go into 4 similar industries: public service, teaching, healthcare, as well as banking and insurance, right? And also from time to time, there's a lot of industry feedback telling us that we can make our arts and social sciences graduates more rounded by helping them to be better with numbers. And we can make our science graduates more rounded by helping them to be better with words, right? So when we combine these two sets of curriculums, we are effectively dealing with all these problems under one initiative, and I will elaborate on that. Right? Next, we are also combining the curriculum. When we create the College of Design and Engineering, or CDE, we are also merging the curriculum from our engineering programs and all our architecture and design programs. Right? We choose to do so for a number of reasons. For example, students of architecture, for example, the architects that design facilities and buildings, and the civil engineers that build facilities and buildings, and the project management specialists who maintain facilities and building, right? They work together in the industry, but within a university, they tend to be trained in silos. So the industry has given us a lot of feedback that it will do our students a lot of good if we train them together before they emerge from the university into the industry, right? Also, there are many of our engineering majors who build things for people to use, and the designers who design these things to make them usable, they are trained separately in school. And again, industry feedback is that it will do the students a lot of good by training them together. So we decided to merge the design and the engineering curriculum under the College of Design and Engineering. Now, when I talk about merging curriculum under the College of Humanities and Sciences, under the College of Design and Engineering. What we are effectively doing is this. You see in the two circle there, right? The university requirement 6 modules are the general education modules that I talked about shortly before this. Now, over and above this, we create a layer of what we call college requirements. These are broad interdisciplinary modules that would make our students more rounded in their training, and I will be elaborating on this in the next 2 slides, right? And in order to make space for all these additional college requirements, we reduce the size of majors from 20 over modules down to 15 modules. And we keep some unrestricted elective space so that students can pursue their interests. That again, I will explain shortly, right? Okay. Next slide, please. Now, if we look at the common requirements for the College of Humanities and Sciences, and these are requirements that our science students and our arts and social sciences students have to go through. You notice that many of the modules here tend to be interdisciplinary in nature: integrated humanities, integrated social sciences, integrated Asian studies, scientific inquiry 1 and 2, interdisciplinary module 1 and 2, right? So we are deliberately putting this in place to expose students to the ideas about how different disciplines connect to one another, so that we don't leave them to their own devices in making these connections like what we have done in the past. We want to train them better because this kind of exposure would be very important to them in the workplace of the future, right? And as a matter of fact, as we roll out all these new interdisciplinary modules, I personally attend the online classes for all these modules to make sure that our colleagues do not give us something interdisciplinary on paper to approve and then they do something else on the ground, right? So I'm very pleased to tell you that our colleagues have put in a lot of effort to roll out all these interdisciplinary modules, and the contents are in fact quite fascinating. Yeah. Now the next slide, please. Okay, this is the common requirements that all our students in engineering, in architecture, in design will have to go through. The yellow boxes are, of course, the general education modules. Notice that over and above this, we have a number of modules like integrated project, like project management, like sustainable futures, like maker spaces. These are all interdisciplinary modules. And in fact, we have hired a number of very senior retired industry professionals as our practice track professors to run some of these modules so that we can expose students to big interdisciplinary problems that require creative interdisciplinary solutions. Again, the whole idea of doing this is to expose our students to all the connections between disciplines and see how these things work so that they know they are better prepared for the workplace of the future. And again, I actually went online to view what is going on in all these modules to make sure that these modules are truly interdisciplinary in nature. Right. Next slide, please. Okay, so in summary, our new curricular structure for the College of Humanities and Sciences, for the College of Design and Engineering, allow students to go along any of these 5 pathways. If you are a die-hard fan of a discipline like econs, like physics, you can use your unrestricted elective space to do nothing but your major, as in column 2, right? But if you are students who want to broaden, you can use the unrestricted elective space to pursue a second major, as in column 3, to pursue 1 or 2 minors, as in columns 4 and 5, or to do a variety of other things, like in column 1, right? So we call this a pro-choice kind of curriculum. And some people, when I give this presentation, some people ask me, what if some students go along the column 2, They focus on one discipline when they are students with us, and later on in the course of their careers, they realize that they have to broaden into a different discipline. What do? Um, no worries. We already have a system whereby they can come back to us as a continuing education student. They can do a minor or even a second major in a different discipline, and we have a way of credentialing them for this, right? Likewise, for students who choose breadth when they are students with us, if later on in the course of their careers they need to go deeper into their major or their second major, they can always come back and do more modules or even a specialization within a major or their second major, and we have a way of credentialing them for this, right? So notice that when we reduce the size of the major in creating this form of a curriculum, some people ask me whether or not we are actually diluting the major and whether this is a problem. And my answer is this. This is a problem only when we see tertiary education as purely pre-employment training, full stop, right? This is not a problem if we see tertiary education as pre-employment training plus continuing education and training, right? So it doesn't matter if the students choose breadth or depth when they are with us. Later on in their life, if they need to broaden or they need to deepen, they can always come back to us as a continuing education student. And we have already put in place a system for them to do this. Yep. Okay, next slide, please. Now I will go into the fourth piece, which is legal professional education. In the good old days, our law students would learn nothing but law modules, law subjects. Increasingly, the legal profession is requiring them to broaden because more and more law graduates are now going into businesses to become legal counsel, either right from the start or after working as a lawyer for a few years. Therefore, they need to know something about business, right? And even if they stay within the law firms, this chart here that is taken from the Boston Consulting Group tells us that increasingly they have to work with the paralegals, people who are trained in other disciplines. They have to work with technology because the way that lawyers search for information, put together information, and do many other aspects of the work is changing, right? Therefore, in response to this change, next slide, please. Our law school actually declutter their curriculum, as in they free up 1 out of the 4 years of their curriculum to allow law students to do something else. Right? And this means that it is possible for students from the other disciplines after finishing 1 year to then transfer into law to spend the next 3 years finishing their law degree. Right? Or existing law students can also choose to minor in business, minor in computing, or they can do double and concurrent degrees. A double degree meaning 2 bachelor's degree, concurrent degree meaning a bachelor's and a master's degree, right? They can have law plus computer science, law plus information systems, law plus business, law plus accountancy, law plus public policy, and a variety of other options. Right? We also decide to offer the law graduate degree to people who have some years of experience working in various industries. And likewise, we provide continuing education and training for the lawyers of the past who were only trained in one discipline so that they can broaden and they can be more effective in carrying out their work in the legal industry. So these are the reforms that has gone. Next slide, please. Okay, now I will come to the final piece, which is healthcare professional education. Now, the healthcare scenario in Singapore, like in many other heavily populated big cities, are changing, right? In the good old days, we created a healthcare system comprising mainly of hospitals. When people fall sick, they come into the system, they consume healthcare, and hopefully we fix their problem and they are well and we send them back out again, right? Moving forward, we have to confront and deal with this problem of an aging population, where there will be many people with chronic conditions and with mobility problems. We cannot expect them to come into the healthcare system because it will overwhelm the healthcare system. And furthermore, they have all these mobility challenges that we think is not good for them to always have to come into the healthcare system when they have a problem, right? So there are two things that Singapore as a country decide that we need to do. And I think this is the same for all the other heavily populated big cities as well. First of all, we want to emphasize preventive over remedial healthcare. In other words, we need to keep people healthy for as long as is possible. In Singapore, the lifespan of people is now about 80 over years old, and the 80 over years, and the health span, as in the number of healthy years that people have, is about 70 over years. So there is about 10 years at the end of life where people have not very good health, and we are trying to do something to reduce that to 5 or fewer years, right? So this is to promote healthy, productive longevity, as well as to reduce the burden for our healthcare. Second thing is that we want to facilitate aging in place, meaning that rather than bring everybody into the healthcare system and make it very congested, we want to leverage on technology and as well as sending out our healthcare professionals into the communities so that people can actually age in place without having to come into the system so frequently, right? And in order to do this, all these things, we need to leverage on technology. We need to let our healthcare professionals go into the community to work rather than have people to come into the hospitals and the healthcare system to see them, right? And for this to happen, we need to train our healthcare professionals differently. Next slide, please. Okay. And this is why from this coming year, for our medicine, dentistry, nursing, and pharmacy program, we are going to declutter the curriculum space and put in 5 pillars that we think is necessary training for the doctors, dentists, nurses, and pharmacists of the future. Now, first of all, social and behavioral determinants of health. With this module, we are telling people about how the population can fall sick, right? We don't eat well, we don't cope with stress well, we don't sleep well, we don't we don't exercise enough, we don't do things to protect our own health, right? And we are doing this because the healthcare professionals of the future cannot always exist to fix people's problem whenever they fall sick. They also have to play a role in helping people not to fall sick. Remember my previous chart, right? Okay, the next thing is that we have been told by the healthcare industry that in reality, doctors, dentists, nurses, pharmacists work together, but we train them separately. It would be good if we can strengthen our interprofessional education and give them some common training when they are in school, so that when they go out, it will be much easier for them to work together, right? Okay. Furthermore, some of our existing healthcare professionals are not very good when it comes to communications and teamwork, not very good when it comes to ethics, law, and profession, knowing the laws under which they operate. Like, for example, patient privacy and all that, because when they operate within large hospital systems, they can hide behind the bureaucracy of these systems. But when they have to go out into the communities under this aging in place kind of a strategy, right? They need to know all these things because they no longer have the bureaucracy and the administration to protect them and to do all these things for them, right? Last but not least, if the entire healthcare system and all the healthcare professionals are going to be leveraging more and more on technology to do work for them. Like, for example, these days it's possible for doctors and dentists to carry out remote surgery, right? And AI can actually help us to help doctors and dentists and even nurses make diagnosis of, say, multiple complex diseases, of post-operation complications, and help pharmacies to decide what are the kinds of people that are more likely to have drug allergies and all that, right? We need to make sure that all these healthcare professionals are data literate and digital literate, rather than be adverse to technology. And therefore, we are going to be rolling out all these pillars for our healthcare professional education from this coming year, right? Okay, next slide, please. So this is the last slide. And to summarize, I want to let you know a few important things. First of all, what I just shared with you is a curriculum strategy. Curriculum has to do with what we teach and what students learn, right? We also have a pedagogy strategy, which is how we teach and how students learn. And today I have no time to share this with you. I hope that there's an opportunity in the future, right? Yeah. And you know, some people actually ask us, why is it necessary that you make all these massive curriculum revisions at this point in time? And the reason is this. Now, our Center for Future Ready Graduates are doing a great job in terms of helping our students find employment. They have helped our students to prepare the CVs well, to interview well, to do internships that is fast becoming a pathway to employment, as well as to organize big career fairs, right? But all their work can only bear fruit if our students are trained right, right? If we do nothing about the curriculum, our basic curriculum now, and the world continue to change, there will come a day where our students are equipped with knowledge that is not what the world come. And when that day come, it will be impossible for our Center for Future Ready Graduates to do their job in placing our students well. So we cannot let that happen, and therefore it is imperative that we undertake all these major curriculum reforms, even though these things are not the easiest to do. Okay, so with this, I conclude my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Tan. It's a really forward-looking approach to higher education, and I suppose looking at the need for multidisciplinary graduates for the multidisciplinary problems that we all face. I really like your point about when the disruption comes. If we've learned anything from the pandemic, there are bigger disruptions ahead. I'd like to go very quickly to two questions that are along the same line. So we have the first from Jin Wilcox. How is the general education curriculum weighted in terms of credits? And then we have a similar question from Gina Lopez on the subjects and credits for the general education curriculum, and how many do they need? I wonder, could you just answer those? They're quite specific from an academic perspective.
Yes. Now, the general education component is basically 6 modules out of the 40 modules that our students are required to graduate. So the weightage is, in fact, 6 out of 40. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Very good. Yeah.
It's about 15%.
Okay, it's certainly a big change for an institution to embark on, but I suppose what we've all found is the only constant is change. So we will need to be on the treadmill for life. But I think it feeds into the importance of lifelong learning, and we don't leave university and know all there is to know. And thank you also for the Centre for Future Ready Graduates and the School of Continuing and Lifelong Education for running a program for SHARE alumni last weekend and this coming weekend, just on preparing for the world of work. It's been a very enjoyable program for the alumni, and we look forward to our continued cooperation. Yeah. Thank you again, Professor Tan. It's been a pleasure. There's so much learning in that, and we'll take that forward into our panel discussion now and discuss.
So in fact, our School of Continuing and Lifelong Education, we formulate this school precisely because we want to emphasize lifelong education. Absolutely. And we take it upon ourselves to sustain our graduates over the entire career, right? Unlike in the past, we train them for 4 years and we wish them well. Yes. Now we have to train them over the lifetime.
Well, you welcome them back, and it's a real community.
Yes.
Thank you again, Professor Tan. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll now move into our panel discussion, and I'd like to begin by introducing a number of people who are really familiar with the intersection of education and employment, and how employers and universities can collaborate on taking ownership of this context to establish a continuum of learning between higher education and the world of work. So please welcome Dr. Bob Aubrey, founder and chairman of the advisory board of the Asean Human Development Organization, or AHDO, and also chair of the Human Development Committee of the European Chamber of Commerce in Singapore. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right? microphone working?
Perfectly, yeah. Also based in Singapore, we're pleased to welcome Ms. Chelvin Loh, Director of the Jobs Skills Insights Division of Skills Future Singapore. Hi, Chelvin.
Hi, Darren. Hi,
How are you?
Bob. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you. And finally, we're happy to be joined by Mr. Nazrul Aziz, Head of Industry Partnership at Talent Corporation Malaysia. Hi, Nazrul.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. Thanks for inviting. Hi, Bob, and hi, Jalvin.
Great. Okay, so I believe we have Bob up first to start us off, and we're going to hear a little bit more about the ASEAN Human Development Organization's work in this area. Dr. Bob has led an esteemed and varied career as a business consultant, entrepreneur, writer, and teacher. As a leadership expert, he has designed and award-winning leadership programs for Pertamina in Indonesia, the largest of its kind in Southeast Asia, and created leadership programs for Apple, SAP, and Volkswagen. As a business school professor, he has taught leadership, talent development, and personal development in France, China, Australia, and Singapore. He's published 13 books on the theme of human development and leadership, learning, and the future of work. And his most recent book, published by McGraw-Hill, is Human Development Careers, Leading the Future of Work. Bob is the co-founder of the newly created Ethics Council and Advisory for the ASEAN region. Great to have you at the panel discussion, Bob, and over to you.
Thank you for inviting me, and delighted to be here. So we have a lot to cover, and I'd like to go directly to the first slide. So the HDO is a new organization. It's a civil service organization created in 2018. And we have membership, but we also do certification for human development professionals, as well as being a think tank. And I'll mention two of the white papers that we've done recently on this theme of the relationship between education and work. I'd like to point out at this time, however, that we're talking about human development, not about human resources. So we don't consider people as a resource, either for companies or in society, nor do we talk about human capital, because it's not just economic value that we're talking about, but we actually embrace the United Nations definition of human development, which says that the purpose of development is actually freedom and the development of capabilities, and this links into the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's what we're about. And when it comes to the world of work, which is our area, we believe that work is a lifelong development experience, and that's what we want to enhance. Let's go to the next slide, please. So if one of the things that our members have done is to rate what is most important in terms of the priorities in ASEAN. So this is an ASEAN organization. And as you can see, the number one priority within the next 10 years was the question, is access to quality education. So access is a really, really big area. And this is one of the things where we believe companies can help to a certain extent, but we also need the work of governments and the education institutions themselves. Reducing inequality is the second, and as we start to see that we're moving into a very fast development period, probably the fastest development region in the world right after the COVID, inequality tends to increase as well, and this is something that we've seen quite a lot of during the COVID restrictions, is the revelation of these of the consequences of inequality. So this is quite important, is the inequality issue in the world of work as well as in the world of education. And the third most important one is improving the employment rates for young people. Now this is different from one country to the other, but employability is and youth employability is a really big problem for the region in general, and it's urgent. So let's go to the next slide. I'd like to then go through the first white paper that we've done in collaboration with the EU ASEAN Business Council. So what we did in this paper was try to question companies and find out what they can contribute to human development and to education and find out what they are like. So we had 4 types of companies. We have ASEAN-based multinationals, that is to say, companies that go across borders but are based in ASEAN, and we're finding more and more of those. And we have amongst those state-owned companies. We also have non-ASEAN-based multinationals, and I'm working a lot with those, as Darren mentioned, for the European Chamber of Commerce, a lot of European multinationals operating in ASEAN and contributing. Then we have the state-owned enterprises, and finally the fourth one are a new phenomenon or a growing phenomenon, which are the startups and the unicorns and this corporate creation, which goes very quickly outside one country and becomes regional, some of which are set up as regional companies themselves. So we wanted to get the opinion of these 4 types of companies on certain key questions. And the key question that we're addressing in this paper is, how do you get beyond the middle income trap? And I'm going to explain that in a minute. Let's go to the next slide. So the situation that we can see, if you look at the chart here, is that the vast majority of people in ASEAN live in middle income countries. You've got 2 categories. You've got upper middle income, as you can see in the gross national income per capita is stated there, and the lower middle income. But at this point, one of the successes of ASEAN is that we no longer have poor countries. All of them are, and as you can see on the bottom, a lot of countries are moving into the lower middle income area. So what about these countries? If we look at what is the destiny of these countries in terms of development, and the problem is the trap. The trap is to be trapped between a low labor cost country which gives you a competitive advantage, and that has been the competitive advantage of much of the ASEAN economy recently in the large population countries, and not being able to move into the high value added products and services that are needed to compete in the advanced economies. But we do have the case of Singapore, also Brunei Darussalam, which are in the upper income countries. So it can be done, but each country has to do it in its own way with its own particular resources. So how to go beyond that is a collaboration, as we've seen, between the education system, which is really a very, very important development accelerator, probably the most important as we've seen, and access to education is one of the key success factors. But also what happens in work. As Professor Tan said, it's not just about getting a job after university. It's going beyond. And so what kind of work are we talking about? Let's go to the next slide. Before we leave, let's just go back because it's not easy to see. The red and the green are Malaysia and Thailand, so you can see them hovering closer to the upper income, and the purple and the orange that you can see are Indonesia and the Philippines, just because it's not so easy to see it on the chart. Let's go to the next slide, please. So Professor Tan pointed to this, and this is something that we at AHDO really focus on, is it's not about getting the job after the university. It's about preparing for multiple jobs and careers, and even multiple careers. So the ASEAN economies, in order to move out of this middle income trap, need to create more skilled jobs. And this is really one of the big challenges for Malaysia and Thailand, if you look at the economic studies that have been done about the middle income trap in ASEAN. New types of work or new work, because as you know, and you've heard this many times, many of the jobs that people will be doing in the next 10 years, 20 years have not yet been invented. But also the way that we work, and the COVID pandemic has showed that there is a very fast evolution of work itself, working from anywhere, but also the gig workforce has become mainstream now. It's no longer something that's peripheral. And finally, company creation, which ASEAN has done quite a good job on and which will continue. So it's really not about just getting a job. So employment is not the goal. It's really this larger picture. The second thing that we mentioned at HDO is it's about lifelong development. So it's not about just getting the job, but how do you develop during the period and a longer and longer period as we live longer, to the point where you can actually be thriving and learning and changing even into your 70s, which is where I'm at right now. So this goes beyond the International Labor Organization definition, which is sort of a minimal definition of what a job should be, which is decent work. And we're saying we have an ideal, which is that work should be development-based. And finally, this brings us to the first premise, is that the challenge for ASEAN is qualitative as well as quantitative. There is a lot of quantitative challenge there because access to education is important, but not any kind of education. It has to be quality education, and it has to be quality employment. And I think some of my colleagues on the panel will come back to some of those themes about how do you develop that in the countries that they're talking about. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what drives a fast development in the workforce, according to the companies and according to the survey that we found? And so the company point of view is that technical digital skills are really needed. There's this really big shift that I think everybody can see. And so we definitely have to deal with that in the short term. The second thing is that companies, just as well as the members of HDO, are putting very, very high on their ranking access to higher education. So the higher education system, the development quantitatively and qualitatively of higher education in this region is really, really important. Third, they talk about English, and this is something that they want to see in some of the countries where use of English is not obvious for higher education. So they want to see more of this, and this is something I saw personally as a challenge in Europe during the period of the creation of the European Union, where we had to find a common language from all these different countries. So that's going to be an important one, and we'll see that companies can contribute to this, but you have to start in the education system. The fourth one is interesting because you see that individual responsibility. Now, in companies, that means individual responsibility for performance and for their own development. But what you also see is that in the education system, we saw this a bit in the design of the NUS curriculum, is that more and more individual choice, but individual responsibility for how are you going to learn, how are you going to develop, is very important. So those are the first areas that we see in the priority. We often talk about cross-cultural, but you can see that that is the bottom one in improving understanding of other ASEAN cultures. It's important, but it's not just the understanding, it's really the experience and the exposure. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, how can companies collaborate on employability? Well, there are 10 areas. I just want to go through the top ones. The first ones is, sorry, I'm just getting it wrong. Yeah, broad-based quality education. So it comes to quality as well as quantity, as we've seen. Second here is technical skills, digital economy come back. And so they can really work with the education system, with the universities, with the specific programs to start to enhance that and to accelerate that. The third one is institutional reform. And so this is the government, finance, and legal systems, and because the companies in the economy is a driving force in the region. So when it becomes necessary to start to change the system to make it more capable of fast development, companies can help integrate in a way. And this is within the higher education system as well. English language proficiency we saw as being very important. And then coordinating human development policies across ASEAN. Now, this is very easy for companies. It's more difficult for government institutions and even universities, which are defined and financed by a specific country, but these companies want to move across borders. They want to have people working across borders. They want to develop leaders and experts who are capable of working regionally and not just nationally. I'll leave the others. I'm just going to mention the top ones in the interest of time. So let's move on to the second study. Next slide. Now I'm going to drill down into one specific area and opportunity. And if we compare it with Europe, we can see, I think, the need for this. And this is a study that we did in partnership with the Asean Foundation. And as you can see, this was the preface actually was written by the Secretary General of ASEAN, who has been a strong supporter of internships and particularly cross-border internships. And so let me take you through what we have done in this study. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, both of these studies, you see the click here, you can get download those from our website, and we'll give you the link. The first thing about internships, and here I'd like to compare with the European Union. The European Union has been really a champion and an example of how to create employability, but also to actually move the region into the focus of identity of individuals, which they have done over the past years, particularly in the past 30 or 40 years. But in ASEAN, we're far behind, actually, in terms of the masses that we need. So if you just do a mathematical calculation, you would need, in ASEAN, about 1 million internships per year to reach 10% of today's generation of ASEAN youth, of internship age, defined by the United Nations. And cross-border internships, you would need 100,000. And that's far, far beyond what we have. Now, how many do we have? Nobody knows. We're not yet at the point where we can say we know how many internships are being done in a country per year. And we certainly don't know how many cross-border internships are being carried out in a year. So that's one of the reasons that we have a problem trying to get this massive change. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, what is the value of internship compared to education? And here we had a question in this questionnaire for companies as well as for interns. But this one was for companies, specifically for companies. And this was for companies that hire people. So you have two candidates. You have candidate A, who has come from a quality ASEAN university, and candidate A has gone to a Western university for a semester of study, which is basically the default ideal of studies today, traditionally, right? Candidate B has come from the same level of ASEAN university education, but has done a cross-border internship. So which one would a company prefer to hire? As you can see from the graphic of the chart, it's about equal, which means that the internship has equal weighting in terms of employability to further education and to education outside of ASEAN. And it actually has increased, or it has more employability value for jobs when it comes to HR and training jobs, for customer service jobs, supply chain or sourcing jobs, compared to a semester abroad in a Western university. So it's quite easy, actually, to start answering the question is, what is the employability value of internship? It's very high, and it has a number of advantages when you were talking about integrating a region and having people that are capable of working across the region. Let's go to the next slide. So to cut a long story short, because the study obviously goes into other details about other areas, but basically the study concludes with 5 recommendations, which is that we believe that all the actors in policy, whether that be government, universities, companies, as well as the students themselves, start promoting cross-border internships. There's an opportunity. There is a difficulty, which is getting the visas. And we did a detailed study of that, which brings us to number two, is that one of the reasons we don't have so many cross-border internships is because it's so difficult to get a visa. Every country has different visa requirements. Most countries do not facilitate visas for students to come in and do an internship in their country. The one country that we saw that was doing a really excellent job of sending students out, but also bringing students in, was Malaysia and the Talent Corp. And that will be, I'll leave that to Nazrul, who will be our next speaker, to ensure the quality management of cross-border internships. So it's not just about going into a company and finding something to do. You need to have a learning manager. You need to have a plan for learning and exposure, and you need to have credit. Developing ASEAN-wide research studies and then monitoring the corruption. By corruption, I mean there's two problems which we've seen worldwide in internships. One is clandestine immigration, which is one of the reasons why immigration authorities are very careful about internships. And the second thing is about agencies that ask students to pay a very high fee with offering very low quality internships. And we've seen this around the world, whether that's be in countries like China as well as the United States or Europe. So this brings us to the end of the studies that we have done. And I'd just like to conclude to say that from our point of view of HDO, we believe that the next 10 years are ASEAN's time to lead. ASEAN is taking on a global role. It's becoming a very fast developing economy. And we believe that in order for the human development dimension, which everybody would agree is one of the main challenges of development of the region, is going to require more than just jobs and skills. It's going to require quality human development. And we hope that universities will move in that direction, just as companies will move in that direction. And we're there to help as a CSO. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Bob. There are a lot of common interests here, and I think areas for collaboration between intra-ASEAN student mobility and intra-ASEAN internships. So we've discussed this in the past, and I think this is something we'll carry on discussing. Great. I'd now like to stay with Singapore and bring in Ms. Chelvin Loh of Skills Future Singapore. Chelvin is currently the director of the Job Skills Insights Division at Skills Future Singapore, which is a statutory board under the Ministry of Education. She leads a team of job skills analysts to anticipate and examine changes in Singapore's economic and industry landscape arising from technological disruptions, business model innovations, and other emerging trends, and I think we can say disruptions. Her team also works very closely with sector agencies, industry and tripartite partners, training providers and innovation-led firms to develop and roll out fit-for-purpose and timely job skills insights to support the changing requirements in Singapore. Prior to joining Skills Future, Chelvin was part of the management team, driving SME development, business capability and human capital development and internationalization efforts at Enterprise Singapore, Spring Singapore and IE Singapore. So a wealth of experience to bring to the panel today. Pleasure to have you here, Chelvin, and look forward to your presentation.
Thanks so much, Darren. Can you hear me properly?
Perfectly, no problem.
Great. Thanks so much, Darren. I didn't expect you to be reading. Anyway, there's, I think what's important is what we want to share today with the panelists today and the audience today. I'm happy to take questions after this. So I think today we really want to touch on Skills Future Singapore's experience in how we sort of facilitate university employment engagement and how Singapore's experience in trying to enhance graduate employability in Singapore. Right? I'll just take the next 10 minutes to share some of our experience and what we've done so far across since 2014 until now. And I think we can take the Q&A after that. Next slide, please. So just a short introduction. I think Darren has gone into quite a fair bit of where I come from, but needless to say, I lead a team of about 15 job skills analysts today in SSG. So our job skills analysts, like Kelsey you see on the screen, is one of the team that we work very closely with our sector agencies to come up with some of these job skills insights. And I must say, these are data-driven insights. And it's also something new that I think SSG is developing this capability as the National Skills Authority. Next slide, please. So this role that SSG is in sits nicely within the expanded scope of our Singapore Ministry of Education. So the Singapore Ministry of Education oversees the entire education end-to-end, from general education to pre-employment, like what Professor Tan mentioned earlier, to including continuing education and training. And they look at the education policies, the curriculum design, the pedagogy, and the assessments, right? And they also oversee the huge number of our government-funded schools, our Institute of Technical Education, our polytechnics, as well as our university. So where SSG comes in is we are the statutory board under the Ministry of Education. We are really the skills agency. So we oversee the whole part about continuing education and training, about skills development, about lifelong learning. And we also then work very closely with our institutes of higher learning, like where Professor Tan is from, the National University of Singapore, for example. Also a wide range of private continuing education and training centers. So many of these CT centers that we call them are actually employer-based, for example, or they could also be private training providers who have very deep linkages to understand what the industry is looking for in terms of skills. And then from SSG perspective, we will coordinate the national skills future movement across the whole of government and drive some of these national skills development efforts. Next slide, please. So just to recap, the skills future movement, for those who are not familiar, it was actually introduced in late 2014. So this is close to about 7 years since the inception. There were 4 key aims in the when it was first started, right? Number one, it was really to help individuals make very more well-informed decisions in terms of education choices, training choices, as well as career choices. The second was really to develop a more integrated and high-quality system of education training, one that is more industry-driven, one that is very nimble to industry needs. The third was to promote employee recognition of skills, as well as career development based on skills mastery beyond just academic qualifications. And finally is to foster a culture that celebrates lifelong learning. Next slide, please. So over the past 5 years or so, we have developed quite a wide and extensive CET system. We call them a continuing education and training system. Since then, we have developed 34 skills frameworks. These are a national skills framework where we sort of codify the skills and establish a common skills language that is used by individuals, employers, as well as training providers across our 34 sectors today. And in that, we have done, I think we have collated about close to 12,000 skill statements across the 34 sectors, and this number continues to grow, right? And we have also then, since 2017, we have also started to fund our institutes of higher learning in doing CET. So, and since then, we are then directly involved in the funding, not just funding, but also working with our institutes for higher learning, as well as the CET centers to curate and develop skills packages that are industry-driven. Many of these are developed together with enterprises. And the third is also then we have since curated a good supply of relevant CET programs. One of these is our Skills Future series. There were 8 areas that we curated that was to signpost to our individuals and the public what are the 8 emerging areas that individuals and Singaporeans should beef up their skills in, because these are the skills of the future. And finally, SSG also oversees the industry transformation maps for the training adult education sector. And with that, we have since been rolling out, working very closely with our CET partners to make sure that not just in the delivery innovation, but also in terms of the quality of the andragogy as well as assessment techniques. And the curriculum has to be well curated for adult learners and not just school learners. Yeah. Next slide, please. Recently, I think in 2020, we launched what we call the Next Bound of Skills Future. And the reason is very clear. We see a couple of shifts, right, as we have implemented Skills Future quite a while. The first shift was really the need to expand enterprise capacity. The reason being, we see a lot of sectors that have heavily being disrupted. And the question is, with all these disruptive technologies, automation, as well as changes in business models and operating models, how do we ensure that our enterprises, and especially the small and medium enterprises, are able to pivot? And this is very important. Why? Because today, 80 to 90% of our workforce are employed in our small and medium-sized enterprises. The second shift that we see is really the pace of domestic restructuring will increase. And with this increasing, accelerating pace of domestic restructuring, we do expect there to be displacements, right? And also not just skills gaps, but also skills mismatches across sectors and across segment of workforce. So the question to us that we ask is, how do we develop the resilience of our workers to cope with the changes in the workplace, to cope with the changing nature of work, the changing profile of workforce, as well as the changing expectations of workplaces? And the third shift is really, with all these happening at the enterprise and workforce front, how are we able to develop and build a society of lifelong learners and opportunities where skills are recognized, valued, and rewarded? So with these shifts, we embarked on the next bound in 2020 to look at 2020-25, to look at specifically on strategies for individuals, how we want to move away from funding to providing curated information as a source of competitive advantage for our workforce. And at the enterprise front is to see how we can strengthen the nexus between enterprise transformation and training. And ultimately for training providers is to encourage them to go beyond classroom-based learning to foster greater emphasis on workplace learning and workplace skills acquisition in the workplace. Next slide, please. So specifically for enterprises, these are some of the things that SSG has put in place together with our institutes of higher learning, as well as enterprises. Two important things to just take note here is the first one on the work study programs, the one in the middle, scaling our work study programs. These are our version of apprenticeship, or we call them integrated programs. And these are programs that enterprises work very closely with institutes of higher learning to make sure that there's a tight linkage between skills development and skills acquisition at the workplace, to make sure that there is seamless translation of the skills that they learn at the school and the skills that they have to apply at the workplace. And also then to build our workplace enterprises into learning organizations where they can contribute back into the continuum of teaching and learning. So in these work study programs, many of our polytechnics are leading the way today. Even for our universities like NUS, for example, they're also collaborating with C Group to develop a pipeline of technology analysts, for example, that's really rapidly in demand across Singapore and the region. The second one I want to spotlight on is the second initiative from the right, which is National Center of Excellence for Workplace Learning. This is an initiative that we launched in 2019, and today is led by our three key institutes of higher learning, which is Nanyang Polytechnic, which they develop partnerships with SPIVET, which is Swiss organization, as well as a German workplace learning standards. It's also in partnership with the Singapore Institute of Technology, as well as Singapore University of Social Sciences, where our Institute of Adult Learning sits. So what's so important about this is really we want to work with SMEs to develop workplace learning capabilities, solutions, and systems. And the key importance in this is really we know going forward, the learning, 70% of the learning is at the workplace. In fact, for training, only 20%, 10%, in fact, only 10% of learning is formal learning, structured learning. 70% will be learning coming from the workplaces, and another 20% coming from peer-to-peer learning. And therefore, if we understand this, how then do we enable SMEs to create the kind of learning environment where we can encourage our workforce to be able to work and learn at the same time? Next slide, please. So this is one of the initiative that SSG was working on over the last 2 years, together with many of our institutes of higher learning, as well as our CT centers, to address jobs and skills displacements as a result of COVID. So you see, this was the SG United Jobs and Skills package that the whole government in Singapore rolled out. And for Skills Future Singapore, we were working very closely to expanding the training capacity, which is the blue bar on the right. And we've since curated close to, in fact, more than 20,000 training opportunities across many different sectors, from emerging sectors like advanced manufacturing to healthcare, where there's a huge shortage of, an acute shortage of healthcare workers, to many emerging areas as well, like in the area of agri-tech, as well. And in the middle bar, there's also this part about company training, where many of our institutes of higher learning work very closely with our enterprises. For example, Ngee Ann Poly was working together with Johnson Controls to develop a pool of talent that are digital savvy facilities managers, for example. And then there was a Microsoft together with the Temasek Polytechnic, for example, to look at tech-based apprenticeship programs, train and place programs that can pivot mid-careerists who have been displaced because of COVID into these emerging roles. Next slide, please. So to help us continuously scan and identify new emerging areas, so SSG also works very closely with IHLs to develop what we call job skills insights and resources. The 34 skills frameworks that I mentioned earlier are the ones that you see on the left. The one in the middle is what we are going to launch in the next 2 weeks on the 8th of December. It's our inaugural skills demand for the future economy, where we look into our repository, look into what are the jobs and skills that are important for Singapore and for citizens to know in the area of green economy, in the area of digital economy, in the area of care economy, as well as in the area of our critical core skills. And I'll mention a little bit in the subsequent slides. The one on the right is what we've been developing and rolling out what we call Job Skills Insights webinars, where we bring industry experts to talk about the changing jobs and skills and how jobs and skills are changing because the nature of work is changing. And the nature of work is changing because of many of the disruptive trends that we are seeing in the horizon. Next slide, please. So going forward, beyond just the job skills insights that you saw earlier, we are also building a national job skills repository. This is really our effort to make sure we are more data-driven. Because in SSG, we sit on a huge load of data. We have a lot of data looking at the cost consumption in terms of training, consumption data. We also have our 12,000 and growing skills statements for our skills frameworks. At the same time, we are also ingesting job posting data. So all these job posting data, be it in Singapore as well as in the region, we are then ingesting them into our job skills repository, which is a huge mega job skills database. And from this, we will then use our data-driven insights to curate outputs that you can see on the right, which includes data dashboards, which includes briefs, reports, and webinars that you saw earlier, as well as tools, one of which includes our Career Learning GPS, that is to help many of our skills ambassadors in SSG look at guiding mid-careerists into the next job for them, next career pivot for them. Next slide, please. This is one example I mentioned earlier about the job skills insights that we'll be publishing in our skills report in the next 2 weeks on the green economy. So we looked at across all 34 sectors and we see where are these green skills that are required. And we also look at the top most in-demand green skills clusters by the size of the number of jobs that require the skills. And from here, across our 17 sectors that require green skills, for example, we noticed more than 450 roles that we will require green skills going forward. And the top 3 or 4 green skills that you notice on the chart on the right is really the area of green process design. Green process design includes manufacturing process, includes green ship design, for example, right? And it also includes more transferable skills that we see many sectors requiring now as well as going forward in the area of carbon footprint management, in the area of environmental management, in the area of sustainability management. So these are the insights we feel is very important for individuals if they want to participate and engage in opportunities in the green economy. These are skills. These are skills, must-have skills going forward, right, for our workforce to have. Next slide, please. We also look at the digital economy. So this is another lens that we wanted to share. We look across our 34 sectors with industry transformation maps. And from here, you can tell all the sectors require digital skills. And there is a mix of what they call tech-light and tech-heavy skills. And tech-light skills really are skills that actually don't really need a very strong very strong domain knowledge in ICT, but these are really jobs that require for you to use technology in your job. And the top sectors are like financial services, in the area of healthcare as well, retail as well, and there's a lot of roles under air transport as well that is tech-light. And then again, on the other hand, you see tech-heavy skills. Tech-heavy skills are the ones that are really require a deeper knowledge of technology development versus technology application. And here we see roles like, for example, data scientist, software engineer. And these are most rapidly required in our ICT sector, in our aerospace sector, and even in our land transport sector today. Next slide, please. So what do we do with some of these insights that I shared earlier? So increasingly, we have also partnered with our institutes of higher learning to provide them some of these intel. So what you see on this chart, on the slide here, is really a list of some of the key occupations, right, that we see from the job postings that are in demand. And then we map the relevant skills to each of these occupations. And we also provide the number of job postings that we see in our job boards today, including how many years of experience the employers are asking for, because that determines whether it's a fresh hire job or a mid-careerist job. And on top of that, we also look at some of the adjacencies as well. So, for example, for mid-careerists to pivot into this role, what are the adjacent skills that they could have? They can bring along in their job. So we find that these are important, and this will also help our higher education institution to be more data-driven and to have the most timely market-driven insights to guide their curriculum development. Next slide, please. This is one of the last slides, I think. On the area of critical core skills, this is what we call the soft skills. In fact, as we see more and more disruptions going on, we hear from the industry that more and more employers are looking for fresh graduates as well as mid-careerists who have strong soft skills with them. We call them the 16 critical core skills, right? And we bucket them into 3 areas. The first area on the left is about thinking critically. So here you really have skills such as problem solving, transdisciplinary thinking, because today many of our problems are not single dimensional, like what Professor Tan was saying earlier. Also skills like sense making as well as creative thinking. And another bucket of skills that are extremely important is the area of interacting with others. As you see, almost every job will require you to interact with others. And in this area, it's really about skills such as building inclusivity, influencing skills beyond just influencing your own counterpart or your own peers or your own staff, but it's people that you don't really have a direct reporting line with. And last but not least, on the right side, is really about staying relevant. So many of these skills are things like digital fluency, learning agility, as well as self-management. How do you pick yourself up when you face problems and when you experience a lot of changes at the workplace? So we find that these skills are really we consider them to the most fundamental, and really for one to succeed in a working life, these are essential skills that every Singaporean and every citizen should have. And these skills were closely developed with our organized enterprises across 28 sectors, as well as many of our institutes of higher learning. Next slide, please. Last but not least, I just wanted to end on with this slide, right? While we have developed a Singapore skills taxonomy, we also developed our job skills repository. Many of these are also done in partnership with international as well as regional partners, right? Here, I want to show the partnership that we developed with Nesta. And this was one of our first 3 partnerships. And we really worked very closely with Nesta to learn from them as well, to develop our Singapore skills taxonomy using a very data-driven approach. How we develop is what you see on the right, where we unpack jobs into technical skills based on their work functions, and based on these work functions, what are the technical skills in terms of knowledge, which is the knowledge that you must have on the job, and the ability, which is what are some of the abilities you must perform on the job, as well as some of the critical core skills. So this is an example of how we partnered with international organizations like NESTA. I think I just have one last slide to show you the links, I think. Next slide, please. So for more information on our skills frameworks, on our SG United Jobs and Skills package, as well as our critical core skills, the links are over here. Yeah. So with that, I will end off first, and I look forward to a conversation later on. Thank you. Over back to you, Darren.
Many thanks, Chauvin. And now let's move to Malaysia, to Mr. Nazrul Aziz. Nazrul is Head of Industry Partnership and Graduate and Emerging Talent at Talent Corp, where he works collaboratively even with key stakeholders across industry and academia to develop and execute talent solutions to meet the current and future talent needs of the country. Nazrul, thank you.
Thanks, Darren. So, if we go straight to the first slide. Okay, before that, I would like to thank Share ASEAN for inviting us to this session. And I would like to start with a brief introduction of Talent Corp. So Talent Corp, or Talent Corporation Malaysia, actually is a government agency under Ministry of Human Resources. So we were set up 10 years ago, 1st of January 2011, with a mandate to drive the country's talent strategy towards making Malaysia a dynamic and market-driven talent hub. So our work is to accomplish this goal by attracting, nurturing, and retaining the right talents and expertise needed to support Malaysia's journey toward achieving greater economic progress. So that's a brief introduction about Talent Corp. Now we zoom to the topic for today on graduate employability, or I would say that industry readiness. So in Talent Corp, our core focus is based on this simplified timeline. So our focus is to develop the self-awareness of our student, because I heard a very good point from the previous speakers, from Professor Tan, and then Shelvin also highlight about it. Dr. Bob also highlight about it, on the importance of having interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and then you sometime in the middle of your career, you need to pivot to other career. So that's why with this pro-choice, or a more fluid and flexible education, I would say that having a very good self-awareness is important, because you need to make the right career choice. So that's the first thing. So we have our MyNext, a talent solution tool, which I'm going to share later, which Talent Corp is driving. Second part is on the market awareness. Again, whatever we are doing from the supply side at the university side, we will need to ensure that it is demand driven. So it must be driven by the market, by the industry. So in the second context, we are also getting and work closely with the industry to get involvement of the industry to work closely with the academia. We call it industry academia collaboration, or IAC, where we are getting industry to be part, or to co-create the curriculum for our universities or academia for the future talent pipeline. And then the final part is, the third part is actually where you put what you have done in the first phase, the self-awareness, and then the market awareness, where you put it into action during your internship. Internship is becoming more and more important. It's just not a place where, last time it was a place for you actually to fulfill your requirement of your syllabus, and then for you to get some sort of experience. But now that's a strategy for you to gain your first employment. And then finally, we will also discuss about cross-border internship. As mentioned by Dr. Bob earlier, we have structured a cross-border internship program. We call it My ASEAN Internship, benefiting both Malaysian students and also students from ASEAN. So we are going to share about it later. And then overarching this, we also have critical occupation list. So critical occupation list is a list where we produce on an annual basis since 2015. So it is most sought after but hard to fill jobs in Malaysia. So critical occupation list is being used as a foundation of a demand-driven ecosystem in Malaysia. Next. So I'll go to MyNext. I'm going to share a little bit about MyNext and how important MyNext for us moving forward. So MyNext is a single platform where we are getting students even from their first day in university to be on board to do this profiling tool. So from this profiling, so they are going to develop uh, their understanding of their values, interests, and preference. So we call it positive psychology. They will understand more about their strength, and this is important because they are going to develop their career based on their strength. So even, I mean, if you like to pivot from what you are doing now, or you would like to go for interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, so MyNext will be the tool for Malaysian student, because there is the platform where you understand yourself better and you are able actually to then go to the stream where your strength is. Next. So just to put into context, for the talent, you have better self-understanding and self-awareness. You're able to build your competencies, and also this is a platform where you are empowered to do your lifelong learning. And via this platform also, we are also providing internship prospect and opportunities. So for the industry, we are advocating the industry that this is where you can build your talent pipeline and map the need of your organization with our talent profile. Means that it's not just about your academic background, but now it's also about the profile or the career profile of the candidate. And via this platform, we are able to also inculcate potential collaboration with the academia and industry. And what is in for the academia or for university? So they will have the access to data analytics of their institution, and they are able to develop evidence-based framework for action and intervention to increase graduate employability for their respective student. And this will also empower career centers. Uh, I mean, the ratio of career counselors to students in Malaysia is still low, so we are using this platform actually to empower them so that they can do their work more effectively and efficiently with the correct student and based on evidence. And finally, for the policy maker or for the government, so this is macro level talent analytics. So I mean, when we get all university students on board on MyNext, we are able to understand at macro level, at federal level, we are able to analyze the trend and pattern across the states, across disciplines. So we are able to map it against the demand, and then hence the policy intervention will be again based on evidence. And of course, with regards to any policy making decision, this is going to be one of the reference points. So it will be good for government to use this as data points moving forward. So the whole idea is actually to balance between improving talent ecosystem and solutioning for the future workforce. Next. So this is, I mean, a snapshot of how, I mean, we work on MyNext. So we have a number of components under MyNext. So I mean, the first one is demographic details of the student. Second part is catalyst profiling. This is where you will understand about your value, interest, and preference. So you will understand yourself better. What is your career profile via this catalyst profiling. And then after that, when you move into 3, career exploration, it will map you to what are the best career for you. So you can develop your career roadmap based on that. And then for next assessment will be your employability factors. So we are also using this assessment to assess the outcome of education. For example, we are getting students in year 1 to have to do MyNext, going through this assessment of employability factors, and then after that, yearly they will be doing this, and then so we are able to see the progress of the students. We are also assessing English proficiency as well as basic ICT skills, and then within this we are also embedding CV builder into it. And finally, we are also mapping internship for the students. So we are getting industry on board on MyNext actually to offer internship via MyNext. Next. So this is how, I mean, the sample of how we are using data in MyNext. So in total, by the first quarter of 2021, we have about 144,320 students on MyNext. So you can see that this is one dynamics or one analytics of MyNext, where we know where they stand in terms of their career awareness. So if you can see that the 2% is in need of intensive career counseling, this is where we will get the career counselors to emphasize and focus on these students so that they will get the right intervention. For those who are in the blue, who are clear about career choice, that we require minimum intervention. So the strategy for the 21% who are clear about career choice, what we will do actually, we give them more and more industry exposure so that they can communicate directly to the industry people and expand their growth. And then, for example, in the 32% group, those who are confident but low awareness of the profession, we will also get the industry to speak to them and then give exposure and advocate, create more awareness about the jobs across the sectors, how it's all about, and then what will be the experience working in this sector, so that they will have better confidence, and then this student eventually move into the 21% group. So this is how actually we can use Minax data points actually to have or to develop an evidence-based intervention. And then, I mean, as people always say that, I mean, there's a mismatch between what you study and then what is offered in the market. So education to career misalignment is not always a problem. So what I'm going to share here is actually, I mean, for example, if you are an engineering student, and then your profile shows that you are, I mean, inclined to enterprise solution selling, or you are entrepreneurial in nature. So maybe you can be an engineer, you pursue your study in engineering, then, but after that, when you go into your career, you will develop your career to become an excellent sales engineer. So that's how actually we are using data, or we are using Minax actually to assist and support our students. Okay, next. So next is structured internship program. This is something that we had done since 2012. What we are doing is actually we are giving double tag incentive for employers to provide structured internship. So it's not just internship, it's a structured internship. Employers will need to submit their internship framework to Telangkong, where we will vet and then endorse it before they are able to benefit from this double tag incentive. So up until now, we have benefited more than 90,000 students under a structured internship program, and then more than 700 companies has been endorsed in 2020. So the whole idea about internship is actually to ensure that students now should use internship as a strategy for them to gain their first employment. So we are advocating them from day one in university. They need to plan for their internship. They need to plan for the internship with companies that they would like to work with. So the whole idea here is to get industry to be more proactive in providing the right skill set for the talent, and then ensuring they are getting the right talent pipeline for the future. Next. So moving to my Asean internship, this is what Dr. Bob has shared just now. So we have started this in 2015 because we are thinking we need to go beyond the border. I mean, as much as we are doing structured internship, that's good within Malaysia, but we need to get our students to be exposed globally. So that's the reason why we are having this talent mobility program, and we developed this My ASEAN internship structurally. So we are receiving inbound intern from ASEAN countries, and we are also sending out Malaysian students doing internship abroad in the ASEAN region. So the whole idea is actually to map the ecosystem from the supply side, from the university side, and also from the demand side. So Telangkong play a role in bridging both sides of the internship ecosystem, and we send them to ASEAN countries, and we are giving some sort of incentive for the student actually to go internship abroad. Next. So I mean, we in light of COVID, last time we did it physical, we did physical internship, but because of COVID now we are doing virtual internship. In fact, the next cohort, they are in the first phase of their virtual internship, doing internship with ASEAN companies. But of course, because of the limitation, they will need to do it from Malaysia. But the whole idea is to help them getting exposure and experience working across the borders and across the culture, professionally context and in personal context. So for ASEAN internship, it is between 18 to 24 years old. So those are currently pursuing bachelor's degree, and or at least if they have graduated within 6 months, then with a minimum CGPA of 3.0 or second class upper. So what we are providing is we are providing return flight ticket and visa reimbursement. This is a collaborative approach with the industry. So the companies who are hiring this intern will then pay the allowances, everything. Yeah. Next. So as of now, we have benefited about 215 students across ASEAN region. The applications were overwhelming. We received more than 4,000 applications, but we are not able to cater for all. And then we have 9 nationalities in this program. You can see the countries who had involved in this program. And then we have 28 companies participated across 11 sectors. And then we had sent 8 internship destinations. We had sent our students to 8 internship destinations. Yep. Next. So that's internship primarily, structured internship program, and then industry, and my ASEAN internship. Next is on the market side. So whatever we drive is important for us actually to drive it from the industry. We are fully aware that the industry are the one who create the jobs. So because of that, we are advocating that the curriculum must be a demand-driven curriculum. So we are getting industry to work closely with academia to co-create curriculum. So those are among the things that we are working on, among others. So apart from that, we are also advocating on closer working relationship via internship, talent exchange, and then to one extent, we are going to move into having an exchange between academia and industry professionals. And then we're also moving into upskilling, but it's not just another upskilling, it's going to be a demand-driven upskilling program determined by the industry. Next. So this will be our plan for industry academia collaboration. So, of course, the quick win is to get industry to be more involved in the academia side. But moving forward, what we are advocating is more on structural change. So we would like to develop a proper framework where we are able to get all academia institutions as well as industry to adopt and replicate it across. So that's our vision moving forward. So we hope we are able to improve the industry academia collaboration in the next 4 years to create a robust talent ecosystem between the two. So the whole idea is actually to get both parties to actively involve in each other's business, and then to communicate proactively between the two to ensure that whatever being done at the universities is what is demanded by the industry, and the industry must also play a proactive role in developing the talent pipeline for them. Yeah. Next.
Nazrul, I'm really sorry I'm going to have to cut you short there, as we have run out of time in this session, and we have some very impatient alumni who are really keen to speak about their experiences. But I'd really like to thank you, and certainly we will be having you back to talk about the initiatives that you're pursuing. And I'd like to thank Bob, Chelvin, and you for really all those insights that tell us there is an awful lot going on in this space of industry and academia collaboration. Never enough time in a session like this to unpack everything and really get into it, which makes us realize that we need to have more detailed discussions about this. We will be pursuing those at the ASEAN Working Group on Higher Education Mobility meeting next week. And yeah, we look forward to having you continued in your involvement in the SHARE program. So once again, thank you, and we'll now much appreciated. And we'll now move to our alumni who are waiting in the wings and really keen to talk about their experiences. I'd like to hand over now to our moderator, Ms. Raya Aquino. She's the chairperson of the SHARE Alumni Association in the Philippines. She was part of the first batch of the SHARE program and served as the program assistant for one of our consortium partners, the Day in Jakarta in 2018. She's currently an executive assistant for a leading management consulting firm based in the United States. And yeah, she has a very busy schedule. I think she's been up quite early this morning. So Raya, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Darren. And it is definitely a pleasure to always serve in this share policy dialogues. Way back, we used to have it physically, students traveling and arranging, which I have been thankful to be really a part of in arranging. And so, yes, thank you very much for the introduction. For
Most
the rest of the for the rest of the attendees joining, yes, so that is correct. I have been part of the batch one, so pioneer batch of share way back. This was I believe 4 years ago. Yes, so this was 2016. Right now, thankfully, definitely a lot of much, I would say. Part of it is getting used to being with an international background and interacting with different organizations, because it's very different, bridging. We gotta be honest here, and I want to put it out on the table, like being the Asian conformist culture, so to say, versus really doing things on your own and figuring things out on your own, most especially when you are now out in the employability sphere,
in the
so
big
that
bad
is a
world.
whole
Yeah.
different thing. Yes, exactly.
And
Darren.
you're joined by your colleagues from the alumni associations around the
Yes.
region today. Yes.
Exactly. So we have 4 of them today, and we are very excited to actually hear about them. So we actually have, now I see them on screen. So first of all, let me introduce them. So one by one, you guys can say a few words after this, but we have other panelists joining me. Yes, I will be the moderator for this session. But let me introduce to you Mr. Marco Tatang. He is a Share Mobility program alumnus, from Indonesia. And I believe it would be best for you to say a few words of where you are right now, or say your home country, where you got to study, and where you have been formally employed. As I understand, you are now employed. Yes? So let's go with that first. Marco, giving the floor to you.
Okay, hi everyone. So my name is Marco. My home country is Indonesia. So I was share mobility at 2017 to Vietnamese National University, but now I'm working in Thailand.
Amazing. All right, so you're working in Thailand. What are you doing, if you could tell everybody?
Yeah, I'm working for as operation trainer in BPO industry.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So we have Marco as one of our panelists, and we also have Miss Candice Kang. She is a Share Mobility Program alumnus from Malaysia. If you'd like to care to tell us where you are now and where you have been employed, or same as Marco, your home university, and yeah, go ahead.
Hello everyone, so I'm Candice and I'm from Malaysia. Currently, I'm still in Malaysia. Previously, in 2019, I exchanged to Royal University of Phnom Penh, Cambodia.
Amazing. And right now, would you care to tell us what you are doing and where you are located?
I'm currently in Penang, Malaysia, and I work as a teacher in a local private school.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. So that's 2 out of 4. Now, I would not like to delay this further. Very excited to hear from you. Miss Nhan San Luin, if I mentioned that correctly. She is from Myanmar.
Hi, everyone. Could you hear me well? Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you, Raya, for chairing this session, and we're really excited to be sharing our experiences. And thank you, everyone, to be here. My name is Nhan San Luin, and I'm from Myanmar.
If you would
yes.
About your background? Yeah, sure.
Of course, of course. So I did my share exchange on the 4th batch, which is in 2018 from February to June. And I was employed as a liaison manager at a French NGO, and we did humanitarian implementations, especially water and sanitation. After that, in order to advance my career prospects, I took a degree in Master of Public Policy in Oxford, and right now I have finished my degree, so I'm back to employment. So I have loads to tell you guys, share the challenges that I'm facing right now. Back in the game again, so thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Nyan. But not to leave Miss Vu Thi Bin Min from Vietnam. So the floor is yours. Sure, if you could just unmute yourself, and we would like to hear from you about your background as well. There
Yes,
we go.
sorry.
All right, no problem. Go ahead.
Hello, I mean, yes, I did an exchange with share scholarship to Indonesia, Universitas Indonesia, and I then came back to Vietnam, and now I work at Vietnam National University. And sorry that my connection is not very good, but I do think that the share scholarship experience has brought me a lot of knowledge and new insights, and I have become more open-minded in the process. And all of here are my old friends, and I love to see you
I
guys.
know, yeah. Very, very happy to see familiar face. And I think everyone would agree, right? That this is one of the best parts, really seeing like when is there ever a time that you really get to make close friends with, your same batch, your same age, probably sometimes even not, from a whole different country, right? So this is exactly what I'm thankful for. And so for the knowledge of everyone, I am from the Philippines, and I am from the National University, so University of the Philippines. But same as Min, I also studied in Universitas Indonesia. So I studied my same degree program, but I was also blessed with the privilege to do an internship program to do back end of the support for the SHARE program. And so today we would actually be focusing on basically yes, employability. That is right. And that's why I had to ask you all of your experience and where you are now. So let's not delay this further and go straight ahead to a very curious question that we'd like to hear more from your guys' experience. Now, since we all had this international experience and background and interacting with different organizations, right? So Nyan, Candice, Marco, and Min sharing the same experience, but let's put it out to the table. What do you think, guys, are good ways to improve the employability of graduates? So maybe a bit of background there. We'll maybe have, say, one or two of you who would like to take this question on. But how do you think share has helped, for example, in terms of your employability right now? And I think Marco could be one of the best panelists to address this question. If you could go ahead.
Yeah, I think that my mobility experience really changed my life because it's really high my department when I was applying a job for the first time. You know, yeah, when I win the interview with the higher level management because of I just tell about the adaptability, how I adapt in Vietnam at the time. So because I was applying for sales and marketing department, so I need to know about the market, right? So when I was studying in Vietnam, I only not studying on the class, but also I travel as well as visiting the market, especially traditional market. I still remember Bing Ning in at the back of the university you have market, right? So at the time I do some observation. So that's what I put on the table while I have an interview with the higher level management. So and also how I adapt with the culture and how I adapt with the language barriers. So that's why I put on the table during the interview,
Right.
and they will interested with that. So thank you so much, here for the opportunities.
Yes. Thank you, Marco, that most especially what I have learned having studied in Indonesia, that a lot of the exchange students really get to be more accustomed or more fluent, say, when it comes to most especially um, being more conversant in English, for example. And I think that is really a big help. But as for another thing, um, as alumni of the Share Mobility program, I would like to give this question actually to Candice for ways to improve the employability of graduates, because you mentioned where you are right now, and what do you think um regionally. Okay, so this is might be kind of a general or like a tough question for you, I would say. But
All
just
right.
honestly, what do you think? What are good ways to improve employability of graduates in the region based from your experience?
All right. Thank you, Raya, for the question. So I think what I got from my exchange were the precious one is the networking, and then this is very important as I by using my networking I further develop like volunteering project among this region, and
Uh-huh.
then my employers like are quite amazed by the project that I'm leading right now. So I think one of the ways to increase our employability is to get experience. Okay, before you delve into your career, before you really start your career. Yes. So yeah. Yes.
Okay, that's a really good point when it comes to experience, right? Because it's one thing that is what I really can attest. When it comes to being in the university, it's like you feel like, oh, I can just take this program or I can study this and that and have this experience. But you provided a very valuable point of really experience is your best teacher. And so, since you mentioned that, Candice, I would like to really ask Min actually about your experience and what can you say, most especially that I know it's very different when you start being employed and when you're really out there and start making a name for yourself. So how was it for you, Min? How would you relate it to the experience of being a share program mobility alumni?
Hi, yes. So I will not just speak on behalf of myself, but I will also speak on behalf of some of the alumni in Vietnam because I collected
Wonderful.
their information because I still keep contact with them. And so
Amazing. Okay.
yes, I do notice that at least several of my friends and people alumni in Vietnam, they went on after share to do internship in
Mm-hmm.
Thailand and then in different institutes, and then they came back to Vietnam and they got a better job, and
Wow.
they actually actively chose an internship abroad to do that, and then also I think they also put this as a valuable asset in their CV, and so they got the chance to work at international corporations such as Intel and then Nestle, the food corporation. That is the real story. And then also I have like two other alumni who are like from Myanmar, and they actually after share scholarship they went to Vietnam and now they work for Vietjet, like the airline corporation Vietnam, and they have been working here ever since. And so I do think that the experience and the scholarship itself is of a lot of help to them. And as to me myself, I do like academic work, and I work. I did sorry, I did the scientific journal in English, so I do have to work a lot with international friends,
Mhm.
and even recently I work with scholars from Indonesia and like from Thailand, a lot of places. They
Right.
wrote to us in English, and so I do think that it's really helpful because I have a better feeling about their cultural background, and then I can know how to interact with them in the right way, and I
Mhm.
feel comfortable I'm more comfortable as well. Yeah.
Right.
So that's open my part. Yeah.
I think so. One thing is also the confidence, really, right, Min? And if you could mention from the alumni, say from Vietnam, which countries did they do their internship programs? Did some do more of Europe or they accepted, or more of just across Asia but different countries from what you gathered?
Actually, I gather from certain. There were like two that I knew exactly who worked in Thailand in an university, and then another who worked also internship at the
Right.
university, and two or three others went on to study or work at the same time in Japan and Korea. And
Oh, wow.
for Europe, actually, it's they went on to study Erasmus Mundus
Right.
scholarship,
Right.
or they went on Erasmus Plus. So yes, so like there are like 4 or 5 of them in Europe, but they study instead.
All right, thank you. Honestly, I think that's also one of the opportunities that alumni could really jump up to. But of course, not leaving behind challenges. That definitely it is really one thing that our viewers or the participants would really love to hear, because this is a real story, right? It's like, okay, after being part of the program, no matter what it is or where you went through, there will definitely be challenges we are facing during our search of employment, right? And what lessons can we particularly learn that you can draw from those experiences that you were thankful of experiencing early on during your exchange program? What do you think, Nyan?
Hi, sure. So, first of all, let's start with the fact that job hunting or employment search is a process equally frustrating for everyone.
I know.
And assuming that all graduates, have more or less similar in terms of intelligence and competency,
Right.
I think I would like to share a few selling points in which this shared mobility program has benefited me personally.
Perfect.
No need to mention that it gave me international exposure, and so it connected me with people from different backgrounds and cultures, as
Right.
Min and Marco and Candice already mentioned. So, for example, I did my share exchange in Indonesia. I figure most of us have something to do with Indonesia right now, by the way. And ever since, I have always felt partly Indonesian. So wherever I go in the world, I would always find myself, how do I say, more easily making friends with, how do I say, more Indonesians and especially Aseans. So it gives me wider areas of topic to make interactive conversations with them, not only on a ice-breaking level, but also on a more professional level. So it became more comfortable for me to initiate conversations, and eventually it boosts my confidence because I just don't need to worry about what should I be talking about with this person whenever I meet somebody new.
True.
So my horizons are also broadened, which means that I wouldn't be worried about this. And it signals that I am a self-starter because I initiate conversations, that I am confident because I have these social connections, and then that I have strong interpersonal skills gained from all of those things. So, and the second thing is, again, there are many other talented graduates out there in the job market who might have a higher GPA than most of us do. And by the way, I was blown away by what Marco said in last student mobility in Jakarta. He's like, we don't need GPA. I'm like, hold up, he has a point. So I really believe that employers are always on the search for graduates who are not only qualified for the job, but also fit to their organizational culture.
True.
And the lived experience that we have during this mobility equipped me with this extensive knowledge that cannot be truly internalized by merely reading books. Like, for example, there are unwritten explicit rules in societies that we ought to be showing respect to, such as the local customs and the practices, which might actually be, confronting our initial beliefs and worldview. So it taught me how to be more sensitive and understanding to other people's different cultures or working styles, political and social worldview, and the identities that they associate with. So this is a transferable skill particularly appealing to employers because they want to see proven records of how we skillfully navigate differences and play well in a team made up of people from like really diverse backgrounds. So yeah, I think this mobility program has really helped me in showing a proven record of how well we function when we are expected to be working alone, So yeah, and then how creatively we solve problems that we face. I believe we're going to be talking about challenges as well, right? So yeah.
Right. I think you gave a lot of valuable points. For example, having an initial experiential exposure to having this worldview that's definitely different, because there are a lot of things that books cannot teach you, right? And that's what the mobility program is really like, what we're really thankful for. And speaking of diverse backgrounds, it's one factor which may seem that's very how should I say, familiar with us when it comes to reading facts and things like that. But when you're actually there, it's like, what do you say? Is this polite
Yeah.
enough? Is this right? How do you like, what is
Yeah.
appropriate and what is not? And you mentioned something interesting, which is like working alone versus in teams. And I think Min
Yeah.
has something to say about that. Yes? So while we are waiting to hear from her, I think most especially for me, for example, since I was able to do an internship with a German organization, right? Which entailed me to realize how you should figure out things on your own. And while we have this amazing background, right? Maybe Candice, you could say something about other challenges you have experienced with when it comes to job hunt, so to say.
I would say like the employer would expect a graduate would have some certain experience, even they are
Mhm.
like yes, graduate. So
Right.
I found it like a little bit frustrating because I already mentioned I am a fresh grad that time. Okay,
Right.
and then I think we can actually prepare ourselves. Okay, if we don't have hands-on experience, we still can have like panel discussion, research, especially with the friends from other countries, and then this will help by adopting their views and then in this the current field. Yes.
Right. Most especially that now, and I'm not sure how it is exactly. Last year, for example, there was an undeniably an economic decline, right? And I think that one thing really that makes us, should I say, really stand out from the rest of whom we know, or the rest of our from our batch, for example, is really resilience. That's what I would say. It's like really being solutions oriented to whatever you are faced. That's why you have to rely on yourself first and foremost, in asking for help is the last resort, right? And Min, I think you also had something to add to the challenges, right?
Yes, because one thing I noticed is that many of the students who join the mobility programs are in the social sciences, and these are the sciences that are, it's a little bit harder for them to find jobs after graduation. So when I did the exchange in Indonesia, I actively chose a course in like management and organizational behavior, so that I learned a little bit about corporate culture, and that really helped me a lot. So I think one good tip for students out there, undergraduates, is that they prepare as many skills and background knowledge as possible, just in case you cannot really get the job in the field that you want, then that you can easily
Right.
transfer the skills to other industries. So that's all I want to say.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here, guys, as we are wrapping up, I think I would leave you probably a minute to think about it. What are, okay, here's my question. What are two qualities that you are really thankful for in gaining from participating in the Share Mobility program that really helped you when it comes to your employability right now? Like, think of it as, what if, say, I am your employer and I ask you, why should I hire you? What are two adjectives that would really give you an edge since you were part of a mobility program? I'm going to open the floor to anybody who wants to go first.
Yeah, I could go.
Okay. Amazing. Yeah.
So the thing about this shared mobility program is that it helped me, like it gave me a reality check of how to be really organized and prepare about, the things when we are abroad home, when we are constantly outside of our comfort zone, especially the practicalities, especially the visa, the finances thing, financial management, those practicalities. And they have become really handy because every time I go abroad, which I have been going abroad these days really frequently. So every time I go abroad, I have to check my visa. I'm like very, very meticulous already. And then about the financial management as well. As graduates, we always have this transition period before sending applications for jobs, and then versus landing a job. So within this period of transition period, I feel like we need to be really strategic about our challenges. Like, for example, in this period, what is the money, what is for the rent or the food that are going to cost us daily? And then other hidden costs such as what are we going to wear to the interview? What is appropriate dress and how are we going to buy it? And if we go to there, how do we go? The transportation costs, and then if it is far, then we might be hungry, so we eat something, we snack something. So those kind of very little things that doesn't seem very noticeable, but then it become accumulative. So we need to be really, really strategic about making plans about those financial, budget before we actually land a job and start earning. So this is what I would suggest new graduates, fresh graduates, to be keeping in mind. So yeah, the practicalities.
Thanks for that. What about you, Candice?
Two is flexible and open-minded, which are very important, especially when now I'm in a local school, and this school is actively looking for a change. So they definitely need people who are flexible and open-minded to help them, because they just don't want to stay at the same point and not moving. Yes.
Amazing. What about for you, Min? Thanks, Candice.
Yes, for me, I think it's when I was in a new environment, the best thing that we could learn to do is to face challenges and face completely new environment and new things to deal with. So that adds to the point of Nian, and so I think it's about facing challenges. And when I came back, I also used that skill to be proactive when dealing with challenges. And so I approached the manager and people like that to ask for jobs and network and. Yes, and then I got the job that I want. So that's what I like.
Thank you so much. All right, as we wrap up, finally from Marco, 2 things that you think share mobility program.
Yeah, the first one is confidence, and the second one is very important, is open-mindedness. Why it's really useful for my job right now, because related to social issues, for Indonesia, there are some social issues that taboo to be discussed. When I was exchanging in Vietnam, I can adapt with the kind of issues like gender equality, sexual orientation, and gender expression. So it really helped me in my workplace and work environments right now.
All right. Thank you so much. What I'm hearing is a common denominator among everybody is really resilience and really that international exposure that is given. But I think, Darren, thank you so much for this time that everybody had a chance to really share how it is like and the difference of really how the Share Mobility program has helped each one of us, although in all the different countries, may it be from Indonesia to Myanmar, to Malaysia, Vietnam, and for the Philippines, yours truly. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much, and what a pleasure to hear from you all. I feel we've missed you desperately in our previous policy dialogues, so we're going to address that going forward. You're really the best of Share. In everything that has been done over the last 6 years, and it's so impressive to see the progress you've made and how you're adapting to the world of work and life beyond university. It's a challenging time, we know, but great to see smiling faces as well. Thank you again.
Thank you so
and
much.
Hopefully we can all meet in person maybe next year.
I know, definitely. It's
Okay.
been a pleasure.
Very
Thank you, and bye-bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye. Great. So indeed, fantastic to hear from our alumni, and I'm not sure I was that together when I graduated college. It's really impressive to see how well they've done. So they've all adapted, and indeed so have we. Adaptation has been the name of the game really for much of the last 2 years. One area we've really had to change in the SHARE program as a mobility program is shifting to digital modalities of international education and international exchange. And I'd now like to bring in two experts who've been working very closely with us over the past year and a bit to understand the context of that in Southeast Asia, and particularly in the context of virtual exchange and collaborative online international learning. So first of all, we have Dr. Keiko Ikeda. Dr. Ikeda is a professor in the Division of International Affairs at Kansai University. It's also the vice director of the newly established organization at Kansai University called the Institute for Innovative Global Education. She's a founding member of the National Academy of International Education at the IIE and a member of the expert group on inclusive learning and teaching in a digital world with the Asia Europe Foundation since 2020. Keiko, welcome.
Thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. Well, it's at least an evening in Japan time.
Yes. Getting up to, quite late now, but thanks again for making the time for us. And I'd also like to bring in Keiko's colleague and a long-standing contributor to the SHARE program, a member of one of our SHARE partner universities, Dr. Abdul Latif bin Ahmad, who's Associate Professor at University Kebangsaan, Malaysia. He's the Director of International Relations Centre, UKM Global, and a Senior Lecturer in the Centre for Research in Media Communication. He's also the Regional Vice President or Malaysian Regional Vice President for the World Communication Association and works with the Higher Education Department, Ministry of Education, on the National Strategic Communication Committee. Great to have you here, Abdul, and look forward to the presentation.
Hi, Darren. Clear, all clear? Can you hear me?
Perfectly, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me and Keiko, and we look forward to sharing the data that we've collected. Thank you.
Great. So over to you.
Okay, so are we starting sharing it? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen here. Are you seeing the screen now?
Yeah.
What do you see now? Is that, I'm not quite sure what you're seeing.
That will be the cover. Yeah.
Okay, great. And you're not seeing that notes, is it? Just checking.
Nothing else. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So let me get started. All right. Well, thank you so much once again for having us to speak with you a bit about this particular project that we've worked on, share mapping and identification study of virtual exchange scheme in ASEAN. And let me start with a bit of introduction of what the objectives are for this project. So as a higher educational institution across the ASEAN has geared up extensively on its technological infrastructure and access to the requirement of a new norm in learning, it is timely to explore the understanding and practice of a QUAIL or virtual exchange program within ASEAN. And the specific objectives for this project were shown in the slide. So 1, identifying the obstacles in implementing virtual exchange scheme. 2, profile existing virtual exchange schemes. And 3, grasp the status quo of the support provided by the university and institutions of their respective students participating in the virtual exchange scheme. And 4, describe academic and non-academic activities implemented in the virtual exchange scheme. And finally, to suggest evidence-based recommendations for implementing a region-wide virtual exchange scheme for the future. And first, let me talk about the definitions. So first, it's important to make it clear that how QUAIL or virtual exchange differ from other forms of online education. So we all know MOOCs. In MOOCs, students from many different countries have access to shared online course material. In comparison, QUAIL focuses on using the internet to allow students in different countries to work together on a common project. In this case, the focus is placed upon the students and their collaboration on one another. In other words, encouraging them to take proactive participative role in their education. The COIL is one of the virtual exchange practice. It's more closely tied to a pre-existing course in university curriculum. For shared scholarship, this layout shown in this slide is illustrated, which I think, or we think, it's quite good. So core component here is whether there is a curriculum for it in the backbone of the online communicative activities, and if the curriculum is generated by more than one institution, then that generates a COIL. For this project, we have set up a research question, and these are the research questions here. What are the administrative challenges in implementing virtual exchange schemes in the institution? How are the currently running virtual exchange programs designed and operated? And what is the status quo of the support provided by the universities? What are the types of activities that take place public in the virtual exchange module in the region? For this project, 2 surveys were conducted with the 2 different groups of individuals. First survey was conducted on 95 university representatives within ASEAN, while the second survey was conducted on 525 ASEAN students. Another 9 university representatives from the all ASEAN countries except Singapore were further interviewed to have a better in-depth understanding on the practice and implementing COIL or virtual exchange in their respective universities. So let me provide highlights from the administrative survey results first. What administrators think of the purpose of conducting the virtual exchange was asked. The vast majority of the respondents stated that the main was that it is to replace physical exchange and mobility. While it's understandable given this time, others also have said that it is developed and promote intercultural communication and competence, and it was the second highest objective. The study investigated also the class size allocated for virtual exchange programs. While many answered that they kept the class size not too large, under 50, we have discovered also that quite a large portion stated that they have organized virtual exchange programs with more than 301 students. For virtual COIL program, in order to manage a small group project for the international team formation within it, a large-scale course like more than 300 students would be very challenging to apply this method. This result may be that the virtual exchange COIL approach was suddenly applied to existing already running large-scale courses on campus in order to rapidly respond to the pandemic situation. The time lengths of virtual exchange engagement was also asked. Over 48% of respondents stated that the program they organized lasted more than a month, over 4 weeks, and was organized 31 days or above. However, 2 highest votes seems to be from the extreme ends. One is the short, it went 7 days, and the other is more than 31 days. For mode of communication, majority has said that the balanced combination of asynchronous and synchronous real-time or not real-time modes were their preference. So this means that their administrators are quite aware that virtual exchange is not simply a replica of a real-time classroom hours. The study asked for challenges that they face in conducting virtual exchange as well. Over 37% of respondents stated the biggest challenge is to encourage students' involvement and participation. In a period of time that where the physical exchange and mobility has been affected by the pandemic, students may have felt that a virtual exchange program may not give a similar experience. Aside from that, the extensive daily classes that they have to attend virtually, so they're already online, and then they're now asked to be joining another program, which is virtual exchange program, they may be facing the online fatigue, and thus they may not be interested in participating in the virtual exchange program. The next biggest challenge highlighted in the study was the global time zones. Time zones are expected for virtual exchange programs. However, the prospective share-based intra-ASEAN programs that's happening from here on, time zones may not be so challenging in the future. So next, I will pick up some of the highlights from the administrators' interviews. The respondent ranged from the Vice Rector of Internationalization, Head of International Relations Center, and academics to offer in charge of mobility and exchange. The answers provided were categorized into some themes. So 1, the policies, process, and procedures, and student development, university readiness, and the support and the future of the virtual exchange. So on to the policies and process and procedures. From the interviews, we have learned that the process of moving from the physical to online may not be so as smooth sailing for all countries, as autonomy on the redeveloping programs may not be similar across the region. Top-down approval may have to take place in order to actually conduct the program in some regions and countries. Outside pressure to the senior administrative roles may help. For example, the share needs to make a virtual exchange and COIA programs as a requirement if they participate or the members of share, something like that. In terms of university readiness, there are still some clarities required with regards to understanding what virtual exchange really meant, while the representatives are much more familiar with the virtual mobility concept. The September-October capacity workshop that happened did help their understanding, so we see a need for such opportunities furthermore. In the region, we see the disparity and a range of differences in terms of basic infrastructure, including available facility, technology, and at times even electricity. So going well into the digital era now, the basic infrastructure must catch up to make sure that we provide opportunities that the students deserve. As for support to conduct more virtual exchange programs, they mentioned that the more training for instructors and staffs is beneficial. They also requested that ways to find partners within the region for intra-ASEAN virtual exchange program. And this leads to the next projects forthcoming. Now sharing the student survey results here. This slide shows distribution of 525 respondents. There are more students responding to the survey in certain countries, and this needs to be aware as a limitation of the study. There are more second year to and through fourth year undergraduate students answered to the survey, and we had some postgraduate students in the group also responded. In order to identify future possible enablers to develop a sustained online modes of international education, such as virtual exchange, readiness of their current learning environment is critical. The survey investigated how students perceive institutional support to enable digital learning during the pandemic crisis time. So 67% of them responded that they have a suitable study environment at home for online learning, which included that they have a space to work, have a good internet access, and a computer to use. 11.2% of them indicate that they do not have a sufficient environment. Overall, we should remark that approximately 1/3 of the whole respondents indicating some of comfortless context, which is not a neglectable number, so we need to do something about it. With the pandemic lockdown, students are left with no choice but to bear with the context at home to proceed with their learning. When the campuses become open once again, we might see a different picture. They would have the option to either study from home or on campus where a good facility to study online is available. So we will need to investigate furthermore from this point on. When we ask them what are the positive benefits of the online blended learning experience that they want to keep even when the campus studies resume, responders had indicated that they appreciate online mode enables learning at their own pace. They also like the integrated digital learning resources, such as use of LMS, student information system, and web conferencing to design a multi-dimensional learning modules. The results here resonate with the research literature on the learning style features among Generation Z students. So Generation Z students crave autonomy in learning. They desire learning that is self-paced, self-directed, and independent, with the freedom of what they learn and how they learn. So results here show that the ASEAN students also have these traits. Another result here also shows the generation that we have on the campus are very social. They value meeting with peers from different countries, discussion among them, and project work with them as they're learning. For virtual exchange COIL, these things I just mentioned are indeed the highlights of its module design. So we can say that the methodology suits this generation. We asked the modes of online or digital learning experience they had experienced during the COVID-19. That result showed interesting finding. It showed reduced opportunity to join the pandemic year to carry out a virtual exchange program. So this may stem from the emergency state of institution due to the changes taking place not only domestically but globally. A virtual exchange module development requires the instructors from both domestic and overseas universities to coordinate frequently in planning. It takes time, and this coordination must take place in very well advance to the actual operation of the program. So then unprecedented turbulence caused by the pandemic to the universities might have temporarily discouraged potential programs during 2020. Student voices. Students have a lot to say about the best experience from the virtual exchange queer programs. Those who have been in a well-designed queer course pointed out that they were able to work collaboratively with overseas students, and that was the best aspect of their experience. The program design had aimed to bring diverse backgrounds to form a group so that the students had enriched international and intercultural encounters. While time difference was raised as a problem by many students, those who appreciate the virtual exchange program seems to view this even as a creativity challenge. So it's a good challenge. Their voices on the worst experiences are also very insightful as well. When the virtual exchange module is not well designed due to diverse reasons, including shortage of time to develop the course design or coordination with the overseas partner class, etc., it may bring out the not so welcome results for the students' learning in. Remember, those who had a good course design in the virtual exchange program mentioned that time zones and technology issues were creative challenges. But when the design provides a poor experience and then these issues come back and then they start to become a really bothersome factor. Now on to the discussion recommendations. With the results shared this far, let us bring to you some of the discussions. Among many things to discuss, two of them are listed today. First point refers to the quality of the virtual exchange course. Many programs were emerging as a rapid response reaction to the pandemic lockdown. They may have been labeled as virtual exchange or program, yet the course design may simply follow a traditional method of course provision without arranging to bring a collaborative project-based learning opportunities in an international group. Intentionally integrated intercultural learning process may not be assured in that rapidly developed module. In other words, improving the quality of the virtual exchange modules would bring better experience with students, and to do that, there needs to be a chance to get trained to design the program better. Second point refers to the future of the virtual exchange in the post-COVID phase. Many universities have mentioned that there have been positive outcomes and reviews of the virtual exchange programs. They felt that the hybrid approach towards exchange and mobility would be the key for the future. And they would need to consider how to bring out the blended methodology successfully in the post-COVID phase. This will be an ongoing work in progress. If the situation ASEAN improves with the pandemic, we ought to be ready for the next phase. For recommendations, we also have a couple points to highlight today. For one, reflecting on the request from those who responded in our study, more training opportunities should be upcoming. There must be a few more series of capacity building training to be developed involving more universities within the region, and further, customized consultation may also be needed to resolve individual challenges in each country and institution. Second point is to build a more scaffolded support for ASEAN higher educational institutions to learn, be trained, and find collaborating partners to operate a virtual exchange program. There is a need to develop a regional queer virtual platform or network directory where the academics and university representatives will know what queer opportunity is available. There should be so much potential for universities to find collaborators within the ASEAN region. The concept needs to be communicated further and then be better understood by universities within that region through other associations such as AUN or AIMS, collaborating with those organizations and networks. We will see they also see the same value in this pedagogy as well. So these are the two recommendations, and then that concludes our presentation from my end. And over to you, Latif, if you had any other comments to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Keiko. we learn a lot about ASEAN region and COIL and virtual exchange. We learn that there is a need for us to have further capacity building training. We need to have a proper definition or a proper understanding of what virtual exchange or COIL really means within the region. And I believe that organizations such as SHARE would be a great platform to actually organize these activities and to actually kick off what COIL and VE or the potential of COIL and VE within the region. You, Darren?
Yeah, thanks very much, both. I mean, we've both been, or the program has been so well supported by you both, and working very closely with the SHARE partner universities over those capacity building workshops, and in gathering the research as well. I'm very pleased to welcome now two members of the SHARE harmonization community of practice who are going to join us, and we have Dr. Laureen Chua Garcia, who's Vice President of External Relations and Internationalization at De La Salle University in the Philippines, and also Dr. Tatum, Faculty and Academic Development Specialist at Binus University, Jakarta, Indonesia, and also a faculty member of the Binus Business School International Undergraduate Program in Indonesia. So having been active participants in your sessions and followed the progress of this, I think they're probably best placed to ask some of the initial questions. And of course, we welcome the questions from the audience as well, and we will also relay these to the researchers. So I'll hand back to you, Latif, and look forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Darren. We've got a lot of questions coming up in the comments here, and we've also got some questions from the panel members here, from Butantum and also Dr. Lauren Chua Garcia. If I could go to the first question that Butantum has actually shared, would you like to share it yourself, or would you like me to just read the questions again? Why not you ask us here? Yeah.
Sure, thank you, Latif. I have some experience as well coordinating COIL and VE activities, and as it's shown in your research, each stakeholder have difficulty grasping the concept or implementing or adopting the concept. So to make it takes off, because I think it's a wonderful pedagogy that can benefit all students, which stakeholder is the most strategic to be nurtured first to believe in this?
All right, thank you, Butanto. Well, I know there's students, there's international relations office, there's academics, a whole group of people trying to grasp the information. Personally, I feel the academics need to know what COIL and virtual exchange is, because they'll be the one facilitating the program, they will be the one guiding the students, and they'll be the one talking to the international office in terms of finding the collaborative partner. We feel, but in the end, for a successful program to take place, it needs the collaboration between students' participation, international office in helping with finding partners, and also the faculty member itself. So on my part, I think the academic needs to have a full grasp on the meaning of COIL VE, but in the end, it's everyone. Everyone's going to need to know that. Yeah. Keiko?
Yeah, well, I cannot agree more that academics need to know. And the one thing I would suggest is that go with the package. The package, what I mean by that is the academic, faculty, and students. So they show the impact, and then there'll be, this is how it happened in my university. So I tried it out, and the students had a blast. And they talked about it to the other students and the other teachers. And then so that episode actually had a convincing factor for my university. Like, oh, this might be very interesting to actually go more, bigger scale. So go with the package and try for even a small example and tell the story. I think that might be the good approach.
Thank you. You have another question, but let's go to Dr. Lauren first. Yeah. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, everybody. Dear Keiko and Abdul, okay, you've done such a great job, because just getting the data alone is already very difficult. I think everybody knows how busy international relations officers have become now. Work from home has made it worse for us because we've lost time zones, right? So we're working more. So thank you. This is a great study. I'd like to share some insights before I ask my questions, because I think this might be helpful also for the group. Like, when you got the results for the students and they said that they have a suitable study environment at home for online learning, it showed the Philippines and Vietnam with really, really high response rates. I think that, well, I'm not sure exactly what Vietnam did, but at least for the Philippines, I know for a fact that schools, not just our education ministry, but schools reached out to the kids. They actually provided infrastructure support through connectivity. So laptops, subscriptions to connections and all that. So I think that's what made it an ideal condition for kids, even though they were at home. Then another thing, but I'd love to know if you can dig into the data and find out what other things made it really good for them, studying from home. Then the other thing that I found in your study that was very interesting is that you notice in the results again with the kids, they said something like, you can choose to study any place that helps you learn. This is actually a new paradigm, okay? Because this departs from the usual structured classroom. The kids are just in the classroom, and that's where you teach them. People go to school, and that's where you teach them. But this paradigm will now re examine our existing teaching and learning modalities. So, this is going to be exciting. At the same time, very, very challenging because we're going to still have to deal with some fossils in the academe. I think some people will be very resistant to this. Then the other thing also that was interesting is that students mentioned the value encounters and the interactive atmosphere. This is actually ironic considering that it's face to face that normally allows for this kind of interaction, and yet they're saying that. So that means that we're achieving some level of success and we're still breaking barriers in terms of communication and interacting. But um, from a psychological point of view, also, I don't know if you noticed this, maybe because I'm a psychologist. I realized that this is a great way to reach kids who are stuck to screens, right? Because there's some who are not, or rather shy and do not offer a face to face. So this is a platform that might be able to reach them. So in some way or the other, it's going to be very helpful, right? So it's a psychological benefit actually. So I was so fascinated by that possibility. Then, okay, um, the finding on the best and worst experiences. Um, there was this item that mentions it's something about engagement. Okay, I realized that engagement really poses a problem. Engaging the students, in a class is really a problem. It doesn't matter whether it's face to face or virtual. You still have to entertain them, grab their attention, and find a way to really, connect with them. So I realized it's the same issues, okay, whether we were face to face or virtual. But it's challenging, okay, because if we can create more interesting things to do on the virtual platform, that would help. Okay, I especially love, your recommendations when you said that the hybrid, approach would be really the trend in the future. Yes, and the sooner academic institutions realize this, okay, the faster we will move forward, especially with the exchanges in the region. I also like your suggestion about customizing the consultation. Yes, because they're very, very clear indications of cultural differences. And so we really have to customize because some cultures will not be responsive to some of the methodologies that we have for COIL. We know that. And also,
Yeah, Dr. Lauren, can we address
the
some of the questions?
regional COIL platform. I think that would.
Hi, Dr. Lauren, can we address
Yes.
some of the questions first and get back to you after this? Yeah. Just in case, okay, Keiko, would you like to answer the first
Okay,
part?
so I hope I'm not forgetting the many questions that has been mentioned. It was interesting to actually find out that the interactiveness, that they love the interaction, and then in fact, Dr. Rani, when you talked about the students, it's challenging to have them interact and and be active in a class. But however, if they're on a digital platform and applying the social network application available to them for interact, and they start being very active interacting with each other. So it's an interesting kind of a finding. I think it's a Generation Z thing, that they like interacting on the app or a digital platform rather than interacting in the classroom, sitting in a chair in a very limited space. So it's an interesting kind of finding that we're providing a very secure third place, which is the digital place, virtual space. And that actually enable more activeness among the students' participation. That's what we found out, and then they enjoyed actually. And this is totally different from our generation when we were in a classroom and enjoyed actually face-to-face interacting and getting all the senses activated to actually be part of it. So we actually we need to understand the profiling of this generation that we're facing. And then Koya Virtual Exchange so happened that it actually suits their preferences in communication styles. I hope I addressed some of the things that you mentioned in there. And the customized consultation, yes, it's definitely true, and particularly coming from the administrators' responses, isn't it, the motif that they had all the different local agendas, and doing a capacity workshop at once is great, but they will have all sorts of things that they need to be actually addressed individually. So if we want to do a next further workshops or training like that, we will have to actually have a way of addressing the individual agendas in more closely matters. Latif, any comments to add?
Keiko, in relation to that, there was also a question from the members here. Will there be a continuing training workshop to be provided by SHARE with regards to COIL VE? The answer is yes, and it'll be resuming in the next year. So we hope to have a bit more of a customized program, understanding now that we've understood the issues and challenges that they face, we could work on it at a different level or a different height. Lauren, to continue on with where Keiko has left, we noticed that, of course, Gen Z has their own approach, and they're excited with the new technology. But one thing that's also positive from the interview with the university administrators is that a lot has been done at the university level to train the academics, to engage them, to let them pick up, because the challenge was actually quite a lot on the academic side, picking up using the technology. I mean, like Keiko have been used to this from the early 2010s, I would assume. But to a lot of people, this was something new. So it's trying to make the change constant at a point. So it was a period of transformation. So what we see was a short-term solution, which was just to replace physical mobility. So everything was just in a rush. No one actually had the time to set through. Everyone was about survival. I think now is the time for us to think about sustainability, about how we can bring this to greater heights, how we can actually work on this as a region. And I think that's an interesting approach to look at. Yeah, we have some more questions here. There's a question. Yes,
I have
Laura.
a question in regards to the treatment of COIL actually, because we're focusing a lot on content. Are we doing anything about process? Because even predecessors have identified barriers on didactical, technological, even organizational barriers, and they're all related to content. Aren't we addressing process? Because process will address issues of cultural sensitivity and a lot of other dynamics that answer hows and whys.
Definitely. Core is all about process and the learning that gains from the process. So this is the whole issue about educational paradigm shift, isn't it? When you're talking about, for example, assessment methodologies, how do we actually able to assess or evaluate process? And this has been a question, isn't it? That we're so dwelled upon the output product to evaluate and assess to put a grade on. However, how they actually reach to that output is the actual focus that should be paid attention to. Particularly this particular pedagogy, collaboration, online international learning, is really that necessary to actually address the process part. So alternative assessment methodologies like the rubric applications and definitely the academics need to be learning the new methodologies to actually pay attention to the process. This is also part of the training, I think, that needs to be addressed further. We're not a professional on that area at all. Yeah, maybe a higher educational institution is the problem. Maybe the high schools and K through 12 maybe actually better teachers, picking up on what the students are doing in the process. So maybe we have to learn from them.
Yeah. True. And I think this process also involves negotiations. It involves two universities, two academics communicating with one another. They need to sort out beforehand in terms of the content development, in terms of how to execute the programs, in terms of determining time zones, for example. This needs to be cleared out so that whatever we communicate to the students will also be very, very clear, and thus it'll give a proper structure. I think the planning, it does involve some you need to invest some time in the planning and don't just rush towards execution so that we can really have a successful COIL VE program. Okay, we've got a question here as well. Thank you, Lauren.
Cheng has a question here, and I'm very
Yes.
interested in your reply to this. How much time is an ideal duration? Because I'm getting different responses regarding the timetable.
Yeah. Well, when we heard about it, when we interviewed people, so some people were assuming that they have to redesign a new course completely. Some administrators even mentioned that they need to come up with a different course, and that may take a while because it requires some approval at the university board or the deanery or the faculty or the senate in that matter. Well, COIL offers a bit more flexibility in that there are various options that you can do it. You can start from an existing course by implementing the COIL VE component of it. It doesn't have to be, for example, if normal universities in ASEAN, there's a 14-week program, it doesn't have to be a 14-week of constant meeting and group work. That's going to add pressure to everyone. It's going to be very, very tense, and it's going to be very stressed out for the academics, after the complete the semester. But it's quite flexible. But if I'm not mistaken, Keiko, it's around 4 to 6 weeks. It's reasonable. It's not ideal. It's quite. You should give it a try and see what you can manage with the arrangements first. That's what I think, Keiko.
Yeah, I mean, open-minded about it, and then I think the learning objectives and how to reach there is the more important than how long it should be.
True.
So 4 to 6 is given as a reference point really, because you need a time for students to actually do on a project, right? If you wanted to do a project, you want to do it in 3 days, or do you want to do it in 2 weeks, given the fact that they have to do it all in virtual space. So, human capacity, that's what it really all matters. So if you could do it in 2 weeks, we have done it in the past, but many 2 weeks sprint COIL, we call it, but then in fact had a very good encounters with each other within the project as well. So it's all design, how you actually coordinate it and organize it.
True. And it's also very important for us to be able to achieve the objectives, and also to know that whenever we're doing COIL, it doesn't have to be everything synchronous. So 4 to 6 weeks doesn't mean it's got to be weekly meetings. So do not add pressure to yourself there as well. It can be asynchronous sessions. It could be some uploaded video lectures, but some things where they may have to discuss within themselves and make arrangement for meetings. So those are some possibilities of the arrangement that can take place. Why not I go to Butatum? You have another question. Yes.
Yes, thank you. It was very interesting. And I wonder if it's also appear in your research about, that we talk a lot about Generation Z traits, and like they like to go online. They like to have an unstructured environment for learning. But I notice sometimes when we put some structure, like of course, if we have COIL, then it will be in some kind of structure, then their attitude may be changing, and they are not as committed, or they are very shy to participate, and it's totally different to what we expect. And sometimes also the matter of the language. Is it related, or is there something that appear from your research that also confirm this, like what is the most barrier outside the time difference? I think because time difference maybe in intra-ASEAN is not that big of a problem, and whether there is a value of COIL that they will be very interested to get it, and they will strive to achieve it nonetheless.
Good point. So I've been saying that challenges could be good challenges and bad challenges, right? You know what I mean? So the good challenges lead to their skill capacity to 21st century competence. So the many of the things, team building, structured, leadership and teamwork, and producing a mission all together, even when you have a full conflict and cultural differences, all these things are challenging. They might hate that at first, but
Yeah.
in fact, when they actually get over it, then that skill itself is transversal. And this we're higher educational institution. We should all aim for that kind of skills expected from the students. So I would say that those things are the challenges of COIL, but at the same time, it's good challenges that we should actually throw at them and expecting them to actually, get a breakthrough.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keiko, the challenge of online learning, of having infrastructure building accessibility to technology. Without COVID-19, many university representatives actually said universities will not be upgrading their facilities. Although there's still some digital divide within the ASEAN region, everyone has moved up. Everyone, all of us have moved up at a different rate, but a lot better than we were before COVID-19. So that's an interesting factor. In terms of looking at this, in terms of the students' perception, in terms of the values as Gen Z, I look at it that one of the things that we actually asked the university administrators on what was some of the feedback that they got from their students. And one of it, the highest point was the lack of physical interaction. So that was a challenge that we need to be able to address in that matter. As we need to find how can we improve the lack of physical interaction, and what can it lead to? What sort of activities, what sort of engaging activities should there be? Should there be more breakout room sessions? Should there be more role plays, or something that would encourage more of those line of work in that matter? Yeah. So this
Right.
also leads to So this also leads to a question. It's almost similar, Keiko. As physical student mobility is limited due to COVID-19, virtual exchange and COIL can enable students develop their intercultural competence and complement physical mobility. So how should higher education institutions design and implement something that incorporates intercultural competence? And do you have any experience to share with this? Yeah.
I hope I understand the question correctly. So,
Yeah.
how to integrate intercultural competence and intercultural learning in the COIL program? Is
In the
that
COIL
what
program,
basically the
yeah.
question was like?
Yeah, I guess.
It
Yeah.
is right. So it is an encounter with the overseas institution. So by itself, it's really a contact point there. But however, by just having them put it into a virtual team, diverse team, doesn't really make them interculturally sensitive, right? So this is an intentional design that has to be integrated into the program. And I would say the same for any programs. It could be a physical study abroad program, even. You're going to have intentional modules that guide them to reflect on what they're going through, what are the differences, what do they feel, how do they overcome, and how can they actually do better the next time. So this meta level awareness of this intercultural differences or the competence itself really needs to be embedded in there. So when you have a good reflection phases composed within the COIL program, students really grow. So, I do a lot of questions, reflection survey questions, beginning, middle, and the end of the COIL program. So then, they have a moment from time to time that they can reflect on themselves and how well are they doing? How else can they actually do it better? And what did they learn from it? So even, 4 weeks experience, it's very short when you think about it, right? But still, when you have the reflection, deeply digging into that aspect of it, they learn a lot and they grow a lot.
Okay. Yeah, agree. I think there needs to be some reflection taking place for the students as well, in terms of they must remember that the execution of a COIL program is not just about learning new content, but what is the experience of communicating with others, working as a team with international members, understanding and learning about other people's culture of doing work, and also their national culture as well. And that would be an excellent way of incorporating intercultural competence to it. We've got a question from Noel here. In which disciplines or courses did COIL prove to be more effective?
So good question. What we means by effective is a deep question there, but
Yeah.
I would say, it's easy to actually embed it into liberal art humanities courses, of course, because they're talking about culture, they're talking about, that kind of areas already. But when you're actually integrating into STEM subjects and having them actually do a project and then reflect on themselves for the intercultural moments, that brings a lot of changes on a student. So I would say that that's the most effective one, and we've actually observed that at Kansai University. Science students are not really so good about, talking about themselves and then integrating, understanding the culture, the sensitivity and all that. But then that aspect, the soft skills, so to speak, is really necessary for particularly the people who will be working internationally in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think for ASEAN region, I think it's always easy for us we tend to find out what doesn't work yet rather than finding what we have as an opportunity to be most effective in. I would say give it a try. to more, if you think that, if things could not happen, hey, let's just give it a try. And if it doesn't work, it wouldn't be a total failure. You learn
It's not the end of the world. No, there's no failure. And if you actually reflect on it and then get the lesson learned from it, there's no failure.
May I comment a bit on that question? Actually,
yes.
I think if we can arrange a group project that have a multidisciplinary students, it is going to be very interesting because they will actually share their expertise.
True.
Right.
Agree with you. We have one
I
last
agree.
question. Yeah.
Actually, I was surprised because
yes, Lauren.
sorry, I actually was going to follow up on Jake that the humanities and social sciences, liberal arts, were the most obviously well, it was beneficial to them. Oil was easy to do with them, but I'd like to add even the business students benefited.
Yeah, definitely.
And I have a surprise. Our engineers benefited. You know why? They take up design thinking. And so design thinking can be done over time. So it is wonderful because the technology driven courses benefited from COIL because that was our biggest concern. The engineers are very hands on. So what happens to them? I don't know what's the experience in Malaysia, Japan, and the other countries.
It's same. Yeah. It's very common.
It's very similar. Yeah. Okay, we have a question, final question from Axel. And could VE Qual trigger the appetite or prepare students for physical mobility? Well,
it can. It can. I mean, we actually started a coil to integrate so that the Japanese students, you've probably heard about this, it's very inward looking. So they don't want to go outside the country. They love staying within Japan. So we wanted to break that through. So coil was the way of getting the interest. If you actually, become friends virtually, you want to eventually want to go to see that person in person, right? So that's a motivator, and it is working. And in fact, we actually ended up, dispatching exchange students to places they never thought about before experiencing virtual exchange, like Ecuador. We have students going to Ecuador to study abroad because they actually met somebody through the virtual exchange, right? So those are the things. It is actually going to play as a trigger, yes.
Yeah, for us in Malaysia, we've been doing with Mexico and giving them a glimpse of Mexico somewhere they could not imagine, thousands of miles away, and being able to talk to people there and finding commonalities or similarities. I think that excites people, and knowing that, hey, we can talk to one another, we can communicate with one another, and let's bring this on to the next level. So there's a possibility of that. Thank you so much, Keiko, Lauren, Tatum, thank you very much for your question. And also from all the floor members out there, back to you, Darren.
Thank you very much, all. That was a fascinating discussion, and it's one that will run and run. I'm very pleased to confirm that Share will be continuing our work on virtual exchange and COIL, and also with Keiko and Latif going into the new year, and a lot to be achieved. And I think great opportunities for the region. It's a nascent space, but something that we can see a lot of enthusiasm for. Once again, thank you to Dr. Keiko and Dr. Latif for their work on the study. We're looking forward to publishing this and sharing it with you all. And thank you to Dr. Laureen and Dr. Tatum for participating in the workshops and also in this session to unpack some of the findings.
Can I say thank you personally for Keiko and
Please.
Latif for the workshop? So on Monday next week we are launching our COIL course with 5 universities in ASEAN, involving 140 students from 5 universities. So
Wow.
your course were very helpful for us to structure it, and I'm really hoping that we will manage the execution well.
That's just music to my ears. A real outcome of the workshops and the work we've done together. We didn't have time to get to all the questions, but if you would like to join us in the post-session networking space in Hopin, for those of you who are on the Hopin platform, it's on the left side menu. And I understand that Dr. Latif is going to join us in that session. Yeah.
Yep.
Dr. Keiko, I understand you may need to leave, but thank you. And we'll be seeing and hearing much more from our experts on VE COIL and, of course, our community of practice practitioners very soon. So thank you all for today, and we'll move to the networking space. All the best.
Thank you so much.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.